specific agenda item as it is being heard, please submit your comment to the city clerk at iwerby@ci.cloverdale.ca.net, which is on the front of the agenda. Every effort is going to be made to read your comment in the record within the 3 minutes of time allotted for the comment, but some comments may not be read due to time limitations. Email comments will be accepted until the conclusion of the staff's presentation for this specific item and will become part of the record for the meeting. Also, if you emailed your public comment prior to the meeting, these comments will be acknowledged at the meeting and archived as part of the record. All right. So with that, are there any communications?
Madam Chair, there is a communication that was added to the packet from Dennis Revel with Revel Communication. This is in regards to item 5D regarding moratorium on fireworks sales. It's your choice, Mayor, if you want to address the communication now or wait until we have a discussion on that item. And you may want to, there's going to be a lot of discussion today on the finances of the city relative to both the budget and the impacts of COVID-19. I'm anticipating, it looks like we've got 19 participants. Some of the participants might be waiting for agenda items, but it's at your pleasure, Madam Chair, how you'd like to schedule the items.
Well, I would like to ask the mayor if he has a comment on this item or anything he wants to discuss now. And guess you're gonna have to take yourself off mute.
Thank you. It's my first Zoom meeting, so excuse me.
I like your outlaw look, by the way.
Thank you. Thank you. Madam Chair, I'll leave it at your discretion. I'm fine either way.
Okay, I think we can cover it toward the end when we are reviewing the public event and other impacts that we're going to be feeling this summer. Unless anybody has anything they want to interject. Okay, well, seeing none, then we'll hold that and move on to public comments. Members of the public may comment on any matter not on this agenda at this time. Please limit comments to 3 minutes. Members of the public may comment on items on the agenda when the subcommittee considers that item. To make a public comment, use the raise your hand icon on your smart device or desktop computer, or dial *9 if you are just using your telephone. Irene, do we have anybody who wants to address us during public comment, or any of the emails that may have come in that need to be read into the record at this time?
No emails, Madam Chair, and no hands are currently raised.
Okay, great. And then I'm going to go ahead and move on to item 4, which is approval of minutes of April 7th. Mr. Mayor.
Madam Chair, I'd like to go ahead and approve the minutes of April the 7th as submitted.
All right. I had a chance to review them and they look good to me, so that looks like they are approved. There are crackerjack clerk at work again. Moving on to item number 5, we'll go on to 5A, deferral of excise tax and transient occupancy tax fees. Who would like to lead us?
Madam Chair, I'm happy to address item 5A, and I think we're talking generally about two fee items. When it refers to excise tax, we were specifically referencing the cannabis excise tax, and then the second fee item is the transient occupancy tax. The excise tax was established by Measure P and then set by resolution by council at 4.5%. And then the TOT is currently 10%. We've received requests, first by one of our primary hotel operator and owner, Ms. Sue Patel, in regards to TOT fees for the Super 8 as well as Wine Country Estates. The amount that was due for Q1 of 2020, which covers the period from January to March, was roughly 12,000 for the Super 8 and approximately 10,000 for Wine Country Estates. Obviously, after the shelter-in-place order was issued, those hotels were essentially shuttered. I mean, the shelter-in-place did allow for essential workers to stay there, but I think for the most part they decided that it was in their best interest to close those hotels, and therefore began a period of not collecting any TOT revenue, which we'll kind of discuss in more detail later when it comes to discussing our revenue projections. I did get an email request that kind of said, "Can you waive the fees?" And my response was that we would probably be unlikely as staff to recommend waiving of the fees, in part because TOT fees are paid by the folks that actually utilize those lodging facilities, and then we in turn pay a portion to Sonoma County Tourism. So we have a net cost to us to provide that revenue, to promote to Sonoma County Tourism for promotion of the county. Since that time, since our original email that came in on April 20th, I did share with her that I would place it on the agenda, and she may be one of the participants in would like to speak to this matter, or at least weigh in. I indicated I would put it on the agenda for the subcommittee's recommendation, and depending on their recommendation, bring it forward to council. Again, since the original request came in, Ms. Patel has submitted her documentation and paid the Q1 fees. So it seems like she made a decision rather than deferring them to go ahead and make payment for the ones that are due Q1. I would anticipate that given the shelter-in-place order, not very much TOT would be due for Q2, so the period from April to June. But with your direction, staff can bring forward develop and bring forward a deferral program that would at least help with cash flow during this emergency crisis. I don't anticipate that the hotels are going to experience a rapid increase in usage, and they have, I'm sure, as many businesses do, have certain fixed costs. But that's one of the fees that we wanted to discuss. And then the other one that we've received a particular request to do is to defer payment of the cannabis excise tax for a period of time. The subcommittee had previously provided us direction to bring forward various options relative to revising or let's say, we'll leave it at that, as options for council consideration to kind of relook at the fee amount. And I know our Assistant City Manager, Community Development Director, Kevin Thompson, he's been doing a lot of research to determine how that fee, the excise tax amount might be modified to address some of the issues with respect to payment. For instance, the fee or the rate is set standard across the board for all cannabis-related businesses. One option is to set differential rates. For instance, that may apply so that, say, a micro business who has manufacturing operations may pay a rate that's different than, say, a retail operation. That's just one example. I think the committee members also expressed interest in maybe just relooking at the fee and considering, modifying it in some form. With that said, and again, we'll touch on this later, just in terms of the budget. Obviously, it's in these times, it is a revenue source for the city that is critical for funding, operations, and particularly our public safety. So that's more of a comment. And Kevin, if you have anything else you want to share on your research relative to the cannabis excise fee?
Yes. Well, there's two things. There's the annual permit renewal fee, which we're also looking at, along with the excise. And like David mentioned, the city of Santa Rosa charges a different excise tax for different types of businesses, the retail being the highest one, and then ones who just kind of deal business to business, it's lower. So I'll be bringing forward some proposals. So there's two things. There's the excise, and then there's the annual renewal, which we did discuss at the last meeting. And that's pretty expensive, and it has to do with our auditing. So I am working on it and finding some interesting things that hopefully we can present to the committee and get some recommendations and bring it on to the council.
Is that it for the staff report?
Madam Chair, that's it. But we're welcome you to have a discussion, conversation, and we can certainly share any feedback we have. But we're really kind of seeking your direction and whether you support the idea of a modified fee structure. I think more what we're hearing is a desire for deferral more than anything. But I'm sure if we wanted to kind of take a comprehensive look, maybe there's some combination of deferral and or modification.
Okay. Well, we've kind of got, this is kind of a twofer. And I think that when we go to council, we got to break it up so that we don't, we can just concentrate on one thing at a time. So I kind of like to jump back to the TOT issue. And I don't want to put the mayor on the spot. He is our resident former innkeeper. So I'm kind of interested in what Gus has to say about the TOT issue. I don't know, Gus, did you want to weigh in on this?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, I would. The readjusting the excise fee and making some changes to that is a separate topic.
Right. Let's keep those two separate. So from now on,
Okay. And it's truly not agendized. But let's go back to the TOT. I think that truly cost accounting, when the customer pays you and he checks out, 10% of that should go into your taxes due, and the rest goes into your general account. But being in that industry, I know how easy it is to commingle those funds and wind up using that tax. I don't mind doing a deferral, a waiver. I don't think we should do. First of all, I don't think it's fair for everybody else that collects his taxes, whether it be TOT, excise tax, sales tax, and submits it on a timely basis. So it's not fair to them. But the long and the short, I'd still like to see the reports submitted. So it may not include a check, but I'd like to see exactly what the receivable is that we would have coming into the city. So I could support a deferral on the TOT. On the excise, the same thing. The reports should continue to be coming in, but the tax could be deferred on some type of a structure.
Yeah. It really is, two separate issues, because, the TOT issue is a result of the COVID crisis. And, honestly, the local cannabis industry really brought this to our attention in good faith before, the crisis started. Just saying, this is we're really getting hammered at the state level. We want to pay it, but we're getting hammered at the state level, and it's also a timing issue. So I think that they, it's really two separate issues. But I just back to trying to, do one at a time. I have to say, yeah, I concur with the mayor. I think this is very similar to the initial response, like, oh, well, let's, defer sales tax and let's defer property taxes. And the fact is that, the cities and our communities rely on that revenue, and they should have been setting that aside when, the person checked out of the room. And, and I think that, on this, when we were considering, when other jurisdictions were considering it for sales taxes, it was, I think it was, their heart was in the right place, but it didn't take into account the economic realities. And that's just a key part of our cash flow as well. And we need to see that going. So, yeah, I don't think it's fair to the other innkeepers who probably, were putting that money aside and we're ready to pay it. So it's like, I don't mind a payment plan, but I can't really support a deferral. So does that issue need to go to the whole council, or?
Yeah, it'd be necessary to bring forward a resolution for the council to support a deferral program so that it could be implemented, because otherwise currently they're required to pay on a quarterly basis.
Right.
What they collect, and that's been pretty standard for as long as I can recall.
Other council members may not, want to be flexible on that. So that's, we're all going to have to agree on that. But I feel like it's probably something I can go along with. I also want to find out, is there anybody? We probably need to open it up to public comment. Is there anybody here who wants to speak on this issue? Is Ms. Patel participating, or is there any correspondence on this, Irene?
Okay, I do have one person by the name of Patrick, and no additional correspondence, so I will open it up for him to speak.
And this is the issue that he's interested in speaking about?
Let's see, I believe so. So just to clarify, this is for?
This is regarding TOT.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so here we go. Okay, so you're live and unmuted. If you would like to make your comment.
I was trying to undo it. Sorry, I'm for the next one, not the TOT.
Okay,
Oh,
thank
okay.
you.
Right. All right. So any other public comment regarding the TOT issue? So Gus, are you okay with sending it up to council?
I am, yes.
Okay, great. So it sounds like you've got direction on that.
Okay, well, and if you support this idea, we would any deferral that we would consider would be within the fiscal year, because obviously we try to budget and account for those revenues with our fiscal year budget, and that way at least any deferral we could still consider it as revenue received within the budget year, so that it's not like a long-term deferral that are pushing out revenues to different fiscal years.
Okay.
But direction noted.
That sounds reasonable. Okay, great. Then we're going to move on to what is it? It's item 5A.1 or 0.2. So we'll go back to the excise tax issue. Gus, did you have anything that you were?
No, I wholeheartedly agree that we need to look at it.
Okay.
But as far as the taxes that are due, it's a completely separate matter right now. And I would not mind coming up with a deferral program. But it's the same thing as with the TOT tax from a cost accounting standpoint.
Yeah.
So just on this issue, I would support it. And again, falling within the calendar year, I should say within the fiscal year, so that we have our true revenues.
Yeah, I was hoping that we would, be able to, instead of, just one big fee being due, that we be able to so that's what some of the input in the letter suggested was, is like, couldn't there be like could there be quarterly payments? Could there be, ways that we can work on this? And then kind of, learning how Santa Rosa breaks them out a little bit differently, and that's kind of, the retail pays a slightly bigger chunk, wholesalers and, small distributors maybe pay a smaller fee. That just is consistent with, other business taxes and other rules. It just seems a little bit more reasonable. I don't know, just Susie, did you have anything to add on that as far as it just being, what part of what we're trying to do here is normalize this industry and have it be consistent and not, punitive, and what, which is what I think the state is doing in so many ways. They're just really hammering, mom and pops and small businesses, and their fees are so high that we're not actually able to collect the fees that we need to actually, manage the industry locally. So, so just, wondering what your thoughts are on this.
Well, I think that it's a good idea to have a structure where everything is paid equally. But if you want retail to pay more, then they're probably going to end up paying more than the 4.5% that we currently have. So then you're probably going to have, people screaming on that side.
That's a great point.
So, I think the 4.5 to me, I don't know every industry and what they're doing in all of them, but 4.5% seems reasonable and even on the lower end than some of the other cities. Like, I'm only thinking of a few, but it seems like we're on the lower end, even when you compare, like, okay, some do it by number of feet in your business, or square feet, or number of plants, or number of flowers, or number of, they kind of stretch it out, but I still think we're probably going to fall lower than other districts. But it's worth looking into and seeing if we can save some money, but then we're probably going to end up charging other people more. So it's 6 of one and half a dozen of the other.
Okay. Any other questions, Gus, or comments?
No, I'm good. I just think we have to step back and take a look at it.
Okay.
But as far as the item that's on the table, I'm okay with deferring it.
Okay. So at this time, I'm going to open up to public comment. And Irene, can you take care of that for us?
Yes. Let's see. So at this time, I'm not seeing any hands up for the item on the excise.
It sounded like Patrick wanted to.
Yes.
So if Patrick is still there, can we unmute him and just check in with him at least?
Okay. You should be good to go, Patrick.
Hi, everybody. Zoom meetings, this is great. But yeah, I like to defer. That's what I was hoping for. And then giving us time so we're not rushing to really relook at everything on the tax side of it. Even as well as, if we're a day late, we get dinged, we get hit with a 25% late charge automatically on 1 day late. And I just think that we got to treat this like other businesses. Other businesses, Ace Hardware, or somebody else is late on their tax in Cloverdale. 25% fee seems really high. And I know that it's, across a lot of cities in California, it's high, but that kind of stuff just doesn't work for us. We're really struggling as an industry trying to get by. And if we are a week late or something happens, to be assessed 25% almost can put somebody out of business, that we won't be able to catch up to that type of increases. So that was a concern I want to talk about, or, put it on an agenda to look at in the future as well.
Great, thank you. Irene, are there any other raised hands out there?
There are no other raised hands.
Okay. Okay, so it sounds like, staff, do you have the direction that you need?
Yes, we'll bring forward a consideration of deferral. I think Patrick brings up a good point, looking at the fee structure for late payment. And I think one of the things that we'd like to do too for deferrals is still make it a requirement that the reports be filed, so that we at least get the reports in and we have that information. And then part of the conversation will be around how many months can, because one thing staff will have to confirm and check on is, originally we had proposed making the payments quarterly, but I can't remember if it's the actual Measure P itself or it was set by resolution that the payments would be made monthly. And so it puts a burden on both the cannabis business owners as well as staff to process those reports every month. So that was intentional, I think, when it was developed. So that might be something, if we have flexibility in the resolution, not so much the tax measure itself as it went to the voters. That could be an option for council to look at, is making it a quarterly payment basis rather than a monthly.
Yeah, that's just more normal. At other businesses, you just do things quarterly. Gus, did you have anything to add on that?
Well, I understand it's more normal to do it on a quarterly basis like the TOT tax. However, when we put this in place, this was a brand new animal for us.
Yeah.
And I think the thought behind it was, if somebody was in trouble, we wanted to know about it right away, as opposed to 3 months down the road. Because then 3 months down the road, the hole's a lot bigger that they have to dig themselves out of. So I think that's why we went with a monthly basis. And I'd still like to see us stay on that. But again, that's a conversation for another day.
Well, I guess we want to, hear, I think we should have that at the full council, that discussion. Yeah. And then have Susie weigh in and just say, what's, and I agree. I mean, I remember those discussions, and this is a brand new industry, brand new from, beginning to end, community getting used to it. Maybe some of these business owners, not larger scale business operators before, and keep on top of it and make sure that things get done. But we might be at the point where it's matured enough to be confident in quarterly. But yeah, that's a conversation for the whole council. So, okay, so
Chair, I'd like to suggest, if there's support for this, that we break the annual fee and the excise fee into separate council items, and with the annual fee going first. If that's, I think that's, maybe you said that already. If you did,
yeah.
Okay.
I like breaking things down into smaller discussions. I think it's easier for you too.
Yeah,
I think there's some confusion between the two, so we could, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and we have newer council members who, weren't here doing all of the Measure P and initial discussions. So I think that's a really good idea, so that we're just really clear.
Yep.
Okay, great. All right, if unless there are any other comments, we move on to item B, recommendations for city-hosted events.
Okay, Madam Chair, this and Mayor, this item came about because there's been a discussion about various annual events that are supported by the city, either through direct support or through issuance of a permit, which involve large numbers of people hosting or being hosted at city facilities like the Plaza or downtown or in city parks. And in light of the COVID-19 emergency and the provisions regarding shelter in place, we wanted to get the subcommittee's input on whether it was prudent to take a position on events. One of the things that was updated on Friday was the shelter-in-place order, but it didn't seem to provide, any direct relief to events. And the health officer was still suggesting, holding off on events to at least in a presentation to the County Board of Supervisors last week, until the Labor Day holiday starting September 1st. The chief and I, the new updated order is 34 pages, so I hadn't combed through to check to see if that provision specifically made it into the order. But that generally follows, I think, the logic and thinking that, we are going to be in a kind of shelter-in-place mode that involves, physical distancing, at least through a significant portion of the summer, even though we're starting to move from phase 1 to phase 2 as the governor's defined in his plan to kind of reopen the economy. It suggests that we're taking a kind of a cautious approach to reopening and allowing interaction of the community to conduct business. So this was also a discussion that we had with Mark Tharrington, who is scheduling the Friday Night Live events. He proactively did cancel the portion of the concerts that were scheduled at least through the month of June up until July, to kind of take a wait and see perspective on whether it would be necessary to cancel the remaining portions of the month, or the remainder of the concert series. I did ask him if he could join and offer his perspective. He has some suggestions or thoughts around maybe possibility of moving it later into the year and kind of see where we stand with respect to the COVID-19 emergency, and whether that would be supported by the subcommittee. Obviously, there's a tremendous amount of uncertainty around this emergency and different perspectives on what its impact is going to be. So I think it was prudent to at least have a conversation around events, and whether subcommittee wanted to make a recommendation to council to address at least through the end of the calendar year.
Mr. Mayor, did you have any questions?
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. This is a tough situation. It really is. Everybody knows what Friday Night Live means to this city. Just the crowds that show up downtown, what it does for our economic development of our restaurants, and just the party atmosphere that it throws out. And I know I'm going to miss it. But on the other hand, a potential liability situation, I think until the county health officer comes out and says, yeah, it's okay to have gatherings up to a certain number, I don't know that I'd be comfortable saying, let's go ahead and do it, regardless of what she's saying. For the simple reason, if somebody catches something and dies, granted, they can't prove that they caught it at Friday Night Live, but are we opening a potential lawsuit?
Well, they're going to try because they're doing track and trace. So,
yeah.
They are going to be trying to track down where people caught the virus and who they were in contact with. I mean,
so from that standpoint, from a liability standpoint, I would surely hate to put the city in jeopardy. By the same token, I'm going to hate to miss Friday Night Live. I think it's going to be a wait and see attitude. As far as this council member is concerned, if we spread it out a little longer, and as long as Mark wants to take it into December, January, whatever he wants to do, we'll support him once it's lifted.
Yeah. So. Well, I think we're on the same page. I'd like to hear what Mark has to say. Irene, can you bring him in? And I mean, we kind of, Mark's also it's not just Friday Night Live. I mean, he's an event promoter. He knows what he's doing. So not that any of us have dealt with this before, but love to hear what he has to say.
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yep, you're on, Mark.
What I have to say is I agree with everything you guys are saying. We're obviously not going to do it until it's safe to do it. The only thing, I'm just sitting here and nobody knows when it's going to be safe. I had the whole calendar planned as of March before the storm hit, and have again canceled the first month or so, a little over the first month. Have not canceled July and August yet, but I'm anticipating needing to do that because it looks like that's the direction we're heading. Yeah, and I don't want to do anything until they say it's safe to do it, till the health department tells us we can. So with you 100% on that. And I don't think we can go into December and January, but what we may be able to do, and what I heard that Windsor might be doing, is starting it in September and doing September and a little bit of October. Yeah. Get 5 or 6 or 7 shows in. But who knows whether we're going to be able to even do that. We'll have to just kind of wait and see. Everything's so fluid. That's what I have to say about it, really.
Yeah. Well, what are your thoughts too? Because it looks like it just depends on kind of what phase 2 and phase 3 look like, and what the social distancing requirements are still going to be like in restaurants, what the food vendor requirements are going to be like, hand washing stations, that whole thing. So looks like the chief is nodding along. So
Yeah.
I don't know enough. I don't know enough to make a call on this. Chief, what did you have to add?
I agree with everything you're saying, and I'm actually going to refer to number 9 of the current shelter-in-place order, where clearly the health officer does not anticipate permitting private or public mass gatherings in the immediate future. And it's all going to be depending on, reassessing as they go along. But I couldn't agree with you more. We're still looking at phase 1. We still have phase 2, phase 3. I would suspect that the mass gatherings and these types of events are going to be stretched clear out into that phase 4, which is likely going to be way down the road. So yeah, I think that's where we all stand. And there's not going to be any great definite answer right now. And I think the health order kind of lays it out right there.
I think I'm going to be getting a haircut before I'm going to Friday Night Live. Which I badly need. We all badly need. So what do you need from us, David, as far as, it sounds like we don't have enough information to make this call yet.
Yeah, what we want to be able to do is communicate to our partners, obviously Friday Night Live, Chamber of Commerce, and other organizations that may want to host events, kind of what our official policy position is. We can certainly convey there's a lot of uncertainty because that's accurate, but I guess if council wanted to, or if the subcommittee wanted to take kind of a policy position, for instance, one might be no events involving say 25 or more people or 50 or more people until Labor Day. That's something we could bring to council and then reevaluate at that time where we stand relative to the COVID emergency and phasing. Because obviously if we, for example, if we do experience a surge, where would that come? What's the time frame look like? And then we'll have more information. So it's
the only issue I have with that is that I don't want to see us get out ahead of the public health officer. I don't want to say, oh, well, we're going to try to do 25 to 30 people by Labor Day, because it doesn't mean anything,
Yeah.
until the public health officer says, this is what's going to be allowed. I just don't, what's the point?
No, I agree. I guess if you want, if the subcommittee wanted to recommend, no events until Labor Day, and then we'll make a decision after that.
Or how about all events in accordance with current public health orders? And then we're going to reassess. We're going to reassess the Labor Day. And Mr. Mayor, did you have?
Well, just that I have to agree with you. I don't know that we want to come out with a policy at this point, rather than just come out with as soon as we can, we're going to open it. David, I don't think any Cloverdalians have been tested here in Cloverdale. And I don't know how many Cloverdalians actually have 19. So do you have any information on that? I mean,
No.
we don't know where we stand.
We really don't.
Doesn't matter. There are nurses and doctors who live here and drive into Santa Rosa, and if they're doing the drive-through, then
Yeah.
I mean, and we're not going to know because they're not going to release numbers to that detail.
Well, I guess where I'm going with that is even 25 people may be too many.
Yeah,
So,
two could be too many.
yeah, exactly.
I mean, I can name on a couple of how many nurses and doctors I know in this town. You know, I mean, and they don't all live here. So, or they live here, but they don't all work here. You know, so we're not going to know those numbers. But I think that, I mean, I guess if you're looking for direction as to, you know, how we talk to our partners, I mean, what I could support right now is, and you know, Mr. Mayor, tell me if you agree, is that we are going to be consistent with the Sonoma County public health orders, and we're going to revisit this at Labor Day to see where we are.
Okay.
I agree wholeheartedly. I think that's a great way to do it.
That's perfect direction for staff. That way, if folks come up, we'll say we really need to take a look at the health order and follow that closely. And I mean, we're getting inquiries about other types of events. I mean, today we got an inquiry, for example, about garage sales. So you know, some of the, I mean, those are.
I can't wait for Goodwill to reopen. I've been like, you know, I mean, I want to get rid of all this stuff and out, you know, and I have no place to put it. So I'm right there with them. I'm dying to have a garage sale.
Well, you know, the other thing too we have to remember is James Gore is really pushing to get things opened. Melanie, I know you've been on Zoom meetings with him, and David, you as well, and he's actually said, you know, we're gonna push the envelope, not to put words in his mouth, but as quick as they can get things open, they're gonna open them.
I mean, I hope that people understand that we are on the phone more than Wednesday. Staff is constantly keeping track. I mean, we're constantly rereading orders, and it's like as soon as we possibly can, we will. It's not like the order is going to come out and a week later we're going to say, oh, well, you know, maybe we should start loosening things up in Cloverdale. That's not the case. I mean, we're at the gate. You know, we're ready to go, but it's just that there, you know, this, you know, and we know that another phase is going to come very quickly, but it's just not going to be a Friday Night Live level phase. I mean, that's going to be pretty far down the road. So I just, as far as like talking to our partners and everything, I think they just have to know we're on top of it. We are monitoring it pretty much nonstop, 24/7, and as soon as we can get approval to go to that next phase, we're gonna go, and we're gonna try to get that information out as quickly as possible. I think maybe that's the important message, is that we are, as soon as we get the okay, we are moving, and we're gonna get the information out to people.
Yep.
Does that make sense?
That does to me.
Right. That great direction, Madam Chair. It doesn't sound like we need to bring anything forward to council. We'll follow the direction of the subcommittee on this, but keep the council apprised. And certainly, if things change between now and Labor Day, we can revisit that.
Yeah, and I mean, guess tell me what you think. I mean, we can easily have a special meeting. I mean, you know, if a huge monumental shift happens, we can easily schedule an emergency meeting of either this committee or council.
Absolutely, I agree. You know, I mean, we can turn it around on a dime.
I mean, I'm not going anywhere. I don't know about you guys, but you know, I'm available more than likely.
Yeah, you know, the last thing I want to do is to see folks plan events, get vendors to come in, and next thing you know, they have to cancel it, refund money. It's just a nightmare. You know, I think. Yeah.
If we see a second wave, it's good to have to then come back home. Is going to be really, that's not what we want to do either. We want to, you know, get it steady down, and we want to end this. We don't want to see another spike. That's even worse, because then people will start restocking their businesses and start, ramping up to get going again, and then they get hit a second time. And I just think that that's terrible. That would be terrible. As anxious as everybody is to get back to business and, forming a conga line at FNL. I mean, we're all ready to do that. So does that sound, so call us for an emergency meeting. I'm not going anywhere. Let me know when I can. Let's do that. All right. Did Mark have anything else he wanted to add? Irene, can you let Mark Tharrington back in if you kicked him out? Or maybe he got tired of this.
It looks like he left.
Okay, I see his name down there. You're muted, Mark Tharrington, so we'll give you a second if you have anything to add. Okay, I'm not seeing anything. Oh, there he is.
I'm having trouble figuring out how to navigate this thing.
You
Not
gotta get one of
really.
your
I mean, I
kids
agree
to
with
help
everything you guys are saying. The only thing I would say is I like the idea of being able to visit if there's a reason to, because you have to plan this stuff months in advance. So if you make a decision after Labor Day, you're really making a decision for something that happens in January or something like that. So we just monitor and keep seeing what's going on and wait until it's safe, or they project it's going to be safe, and then that's the time to reconvene, I think.
Yeah.
And Mark, you're going to hear exactly the same news we hear. We might be a couple hours ahead of you, but I guarantee you, once the county health officer raises the ban on gatherings, it's going to be all over the press, and rest assured, we're going to be on it as well.
So what I think I'm going to do, anticipating that it's not going to happen this year, that we're not going to have it, is still wait and hold off canceling like a month at a time, just in keep monitoring, keep up with the situation, but knowing the chances of us having it are very slim. And keep open that if something does happen and after Labor Day it seems that it's safe, to have maybe a few shows in September and maybe even to early October or something like that. So just kind of monitor.
I've always wanted to. I like to go longer. So.
Not like this.
That's our best weather. If we have a fire, that's our best weather anyway. And I don't think you're going to have any trouble booking bands either.
Yeah, well, we won't have the bands that we have planned for the summer because they're coming from out of town, but we could get local bands pretty easily, pretty quickly.
Yeah. It'll be a different animal, but
yeah.
Well,
everything's a different animal.
Yeah. Every day is right now.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Mark.
You got it.
Okay, were there any other public comments on this item? All right. Irene, anything else?
No other comments.
Okay, great. Then we're going to move on to item C, display of Cloverdale High School class of 2020.
Okay, Madam Chair, this item was brought to council by way of a public comment, acknowledging that the graduating seniors are not going to be able to, host a graduation event this year because of the ongoing emergency, and there's a desire amongst the community to recognize our seniors. Obviously it's unfortunate that this is one of those major milestones that we all look forward to enjoying in our life, and because of the emergency, this has been kind of taken away from them. So I think there's a community sentiment to recognize our graduating class. One of the ideas was to post banners in key locations, and there was a request to consider or have the city waive any signage requirements for the banners. And I think our zoning ordinance already, I think, provides for placement of temporary banners, at least for 30 days, and then that period can be extended. And again, because of our partnership and desire to recognize our seniors, I would even suggest that if council and this subcommittee supports, allowing a banner to be placed on the Cloverdale Plaza, prominently, recognizing the graduating class as a whole. I think it gets challenging if you want to do individual banners, and it's quite expensive, and probably even a little would be needed to do individual banners because it becomes logistically challenging to place them all. But this request did come before council, and it was recommended that it be agendized. I think this is an opportunity to memorialize a response to say that it's, we support it, and the banners can be placed, at fair, at appropriate other locations, including the Cloverdale Plaza, if the subcommittee and council is supportive of that idea.
Mr. Mayor, your thoughts?
Well, as far as I'm concerned, it's a no-brainer. Absolutely. There should be recognition. As a matter of fact, I'd like to see us put a banner on both ends of the plaza. The post office gets used quite a bit. So on that end, we can put a recognition banner at the entrance. At least I think there's an entrance there. We could do something. And then the same on the Cloverdale Boulevard side, recognizing our seniors, class of 2020. These kids are the ones that were born with 9/11 as well. So, it's a different world for them.
I really support doing that banner at the plaza and doing one banner for the class. I think it just logistically and expense wise, doing individual banners just gets really, that's really it gets really time consuming for us, time consuming for, and expensive for the fundraisers. I think that it would be great, especially since we're not going to have probably any other banner at the plaza, announcing Oktoberfest or, any of the other stuff that we see go up, for Friday Night Live. They're going to have center stage. They're going to have it on themselves for quite a while. I think it's just, and I just like the idea of just recognizing the entire class, and I think that's a great idea. So yeah, I'd support this definitely. Do we need to take this to the council, or?
I think we could just do a report out at the council. I think it's within staff's discretion to permit, banner under current regulations. So there's really no requirement to ask for any kind of special waiver or anything. I appreciate the folks, obviously, that want to recognize the class of 2020 and actually coming to the city and asking permission. And, in this case, I think we're in a position fairly easily to accommodate them and support their request.
And this way they don't have to get permission from Citrus Fair, or, they don't have to get permission from a bunch of different places. They can have it in one centralized location. And yeah, there isn't going to be anybody else wanting to put a banner there for a while. So yeah, I think this is a really great solution.
There may be some members of the public here that wanted to speak to this. There, I'm not sure.
Absolutely. So Irene, do we have anybody? You need to unmute yourself.
No, Madam Chair, there are currently no public comments.
Great. Okay. Seeing that, so I guess looks like you have direction. So we'll move on to item D, moratorium on fireworks sales.
Okay. I'll start, Madam Chair. Actually, this subcommittee did recommend consideration of an urgency action to consider a moratorium on fireworks for this current year. The municipal code does provide that the city council in any given sales year can prohibit the sale and discharge of safe and sane fireworks with the determination that this in the city that may include fire weather events, fuel, moisture, drought, limitation on firefighting forces that could create a danger to the public health and safety of its residents and visitors. Obviously, that's provided for in the Muni Code. what staff has done is, with coordination with our city attorney, prepared an urgency ordinance to prohibit the sale and discharge of safe and sane fireworks for the current year 2020. The recitals in the ordinance also reflect that, you know, we're in response mode to the coronavirus pandemic, and we have a declared state of emergency, which, you know, has resulted in the closure of City Hall and non-essential services. You know, and there's also considerable concern in the community, which is often results in calls to the police department about social gatherings and, you know, non-compliance with the shelter-in-place order. So I think at the recommendation of the subcommittee, we drafted a urgency ordinance to prohibit both the sale, but also the discharge, because there are separate code provisions that provide for both. The subcommittee could recommend that you allow one and not the other. Obviously, you could prohibit the sale of safe and sane and still allow the discharge. But I think logically those two go together. If you want to prohibit the sale, you also prohibit the discharge. Just want to, as a reminder, there is the letter that was submitted by Dennis Revel Communications that kind of responds to some of the provisions regarding the shelter-in-place order and how they might address those particular issues. We do note that this year has been a year of less than average rainfall, and we're already starting to experience, you know, dry conditions. And I know that is one of the issues that some residents have expressed a concern about, is potential fire hazards. Do note that just yesterday, Sonoma County has prohibited all open burning in the county fairly early in the year, you know, in response to the concern that there are fire hazards. And we actually, I think we just had our, I don't have all the data, but I think we just had a fire in or near the burn area from the last fire. Obviously, we were still working on development of a resiliency strategy that was going to, you know, provide more mechanisms to address emergency conditions around the fire season. And we know we are going to, well, I should say, we've been fully apprised that we can anticipate more power shutoffs this year. Or they're going to be reoccurring this year due to projected, you know, high wind events. And again, the exact timing of those high wind events, we don't know, though PG&E forecasts that, you know, on average we have up to 3 in any given year that create, you know, potential of high hazard fire conditions. So that's just an overview. This action would ultimately require council approval, and we're seeking your recommendation as to whether you want to move forward with the urgency ordinance.
Mr. Mayor, do you have any thoughts?
Thank you, Madam Chair. You know, I think the ordinance is very well written. You know, item number K talks to the overstaffing of our hospitals in case somebody gets hurt. Item M addresses the public safety issue, and number O has to do with the gathering of large crowds. And, you know, when I say a large crowd, you know, 10 or more in the neighborhood, especially kids, you know, you're not going to have them stay 6 feet apart. And when somebody starts lighting fireworks, at least in my neighborhood on the corner, it's just like a mass. You know, the kids just come running to see what's going on. So I support it 100%. It's only for the remainder of this year. And the Lions have already gave notice that they're not going to be doing their display this year, at least not at the football field at the high school. So I support it 100%, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, Chief, did you want to weigh in at all?
Yeah, I agree completely with everything Vice Chair Walter brought up, but I want to also add that I think the importance of the urgency ordinance as it relates to E, F, and G really outline the hazards and the concerns that we really need to take in consideration for public safety right now. I want to add too that section L makes a lot of sense as it's relative to the shelter in place order in that it's not an essential business. And that's something that we need to consider even moving forward. We don't have that map of what will be deemed essential or will they allow non-essential at that point. We just don't have those answers yet. So I think it falls in line with, you know, I think it's in the best interest of the city to be more concerned about public safety right now than anything else, and considering where we're at with COVID.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. I'm sure someone else has brought it up, but I have in mind the fact that we're not going to have a con crew this year. I was reminded by our head groundskeeper that represents 2 weeks worth of labor. It's 20 or 30 guys typically. It's, I don't remember exactly how many is typically in a crew, but that represents a couple that, like, what, 2,300 hours, something like that, 2,400 hours of fire prevention in our open space that we're responsible for. And also, you know, the other concern that I have is that I don't know about the rest of you, but I'm exhausted. I can't imagine asking our police or firefighters to take on this extra responsibility after they've been under so much stress and just been performing, you know, peak performance for months. Now we're going to ask them to have, you know, heightened awareness around fireworks sales and 4th of July. I can't do that. You know, that's our team. I can't even imagine asking to add that level of stress.
If I could add to that, Madam Chair, it's not really even about heightened awareness. It would actually require ramping up patrol for that day, and that adds a lot to the equation. Yeah.
Just and you know, when everybody has been rested and has had vacations, that's right. One thing. But we have to really be aware of the level of stress and the additional responsibilities that this is, and the toll that this is, I think, taking on all of us. We have to be aware of that. We have to acknowledge it, and we have to respect that. And I just, I mean, I love fireworks, you know. I'm a sparkler girl. I like the illegal ones, you know, that burn at like 5,000 degrees, you know. It's like, it's the best thing in the world. But, you know, I don't do that if it's going to, you know, if it's going to cost the safety of somebody else, you know, or the stress of somebody else. You just don't do that. Yeah, I think that this is just the reasonable and prudent thing to do moving forward for this year. And, you know, we have to also look at the fact that, you know, this is something that had come before the council long before COVID-19. In addition, other cities are looking at banning fireworks sales throughout the county. Just, I mean, out of respect of the people who lost everything in Santa Rosa, I just don't see why you inflict that on people, because it's not, you know, okay, so Cloverdale burns to the ground, that's one thing, but, you know, if Cloverdale burns to the ground, the likelihood that it will spread to if there will be a, you know, a crown fire to the ocean is something that we can ignore. You know, it's not just the city makes a decision for what's right for them. Well, in the right conditions, we might make a decision for what we think is right for our community. community, and we hurt not just ourselves, but the surrounding areas. And that I take that responsibility really seriously. In addition to just making sure we're not putting undue stress on any of our staff or our police or our firefighters. I just feel very strongly about this for this year, and I think we need to revisit it for the long term as well, because I just don't see our weather patterns changing. It's windy today. It's warm and windy today. And yeah, it's something that we have to be vigilant about all the time. So I think you have direction, City Manager.
Yeah, Madam Mayor.
I know we need to open this up to public comment. Are there any other comments from staff or?
Well, Madam Chair, I just wanted to echo your comments about the work crews that we utilize. You're absolutely right that because of the ongoing emergency, we're not going to have access to those to those pretty large work crews that help us effectively manage our landscapes, and particularly our open areas where we have a large amount of non-native annual grasslands that do contribute to a fire hazard. So that is a
that are all surrounded by residents, all surrounded by homes.
And in addition to that, normally this time of year we do quite a bit of coordination with the Cloverdale Fire District on weed abatement, and it's been hampered this year because of obviously up until Friday the shelter-in-place order did not provide for a number of landscaping activities, and so there was a lot of private property owners and residents who may not have conducted their routine maintenance on their properties, on the private property side. And one of the things we need to do is to continue that effort of coordinating to request property owners to seek assistance to abate their weeds, because of the fire hazard it presents. And so it's a double challenge for us this year, and actually even more so because our temporary staff that help our park staff have been furloughed, so they've been without that additional work assistance to help them even manage some of the landscape within that are in closer proximity to urban areas. So I think there's a lot of reason to support a restriction this year, and that would facilitate more time for council to have a conversation around a more longer term solution.
So unless there's anything else from staff or the mayor, Irene, can we open it up for public comments and just remind folks about the procedures?
Yes. So let me go ahead. Just a moment. Okay. So we have a comment here. First commenter from Dennis Ravel, if I'm saying that correctly. If not, I deeply apologize. Let's see.
Can you hear me?
Yes, now we can hear you.
Yes. Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the subcommittee. I appreciate this opportunity. I was a little bit caught off guard by the fact that there is an ordinance being discussed today when it wasn't attached to the original notice of today's subcommittee meeting. So I'm not in a position to respond to it since I haven't seen it, but for the bits and pieces that have been on the screen since we started. I'm a little bit curious as to how we moved from August 14, 2019 resolution from the City Council to have an ad hoc committee discuss this and bring it back to the council to instead this subcommittee do it, number one. Number two, I think that while I realize you are making a decision today on what to do about this beginning Friday, phase 2 or stage 2 of the governor's reopening of the California economy will begin to take place, and we are confident, based upon our discussion with health officers across the state and the state health officers, that our distancing protocol that we've put in place is not only more stringent than those retailers currently being allowed to operate in your community are having to adhere to, and will ensure the safety of the volunteers in the stand, as well as the customers and citizens who come up to purchase at the stands. Last but not least, I would, with all due respect to the police chief, I would comment that in the absence of public displays in communities where there's been a history of having them, and in a community where there has been a history of responsible use of state-approved fireworks, I think it is a gross misstatement to suggest that it's going to be something that you don't have to ramp up for this year. I think that absent enforcement of some magnitude, any community, not just Cloverdale, that has had both public displays and fireworks use will have activity, and unfortunately that'll be illegal firework activity. Thank you very much.
You're muted.
Thank you. Steve and I do it. Irene, do we have any other comments?
No, there are no other comments at this time. And I also, just for the record, wanted to let everyone know that this document did come in shortly before the start of the meeting. So right after the meeting, I'll make sure it's uploaded with the link to the from the agenda as well on our website. And then I'll go ahead and email it as well, just so you have it on hand.
Great, thank you. All right, Mr. Mayor, any?
No, thank you, Madam Chair. You know, Dennis, I hear what you're saying 100%. And you know, in the past, I've always supported safe and sane fireworks. This is a different animal altogether this year. And, you know, we just do not have the wherewithal to do it. I think you've heard everybody talk about weed abatement not being done, the police chief about staffing, social gathering. It's just not going to happen this year. At least my vote is going to say no. We'll see what the rest of the city council does. And you'll have plenty of time to look at the resolution between now and next week, I'm sure. So thank you.
Yeah, I'd just like to say I think that staff did a great job of covering all the bases in the proposed document that we do have before us. It is temporary, and we need to have a bigger conversation, and which was our intention. We actually had all voted to form a subcommittee to review this topic, but just like so many other things, you know, we are overtaken by events, and we have to do what we have to do to keep our community safe, given the changing, the new environment. So I'd like to see this, and it sounds like the mayor's in accordance. We'd like to move this forward for council's consideration. And my dog objects to it. I apologize. She usually does pipe up during a meeting at some point. And of course, it had to be on fireworks. So. Does staff have enough direction on this?
Chair, we understand the direction by the subcommittee. Our plan will be to bring this forward for council consideration on the next council meeting. It's May 12th, Irene, or May 13th?
No, that sounds great. Okay.
May 13th.
May 13th. Thank you.
Okay, and with that, since we have been going at it for over an hour, I think it's prudent to take a little break for 5 minutes. That'll allow me to get my dog out of my office and give her back to my husband. And so, yeah, why don't we just take 5 minutes and we'll reconvene.
Perfect sense for us to do away with that paper and the clumsiness of the old report and just move with a software package like this. So I'm in favor of it. You know, I'm not so much concerned with the current staff or the current city council. It's in the future. You know, I think it gives a good accountability, and it's a good program. So I'll support moving forward with it.
Yeah. Well, I guess as long as the cost that, you know, because I believe, you know, we have to do a, it's probably per user, as long as it saves us, you know, the equivalent of what it costs.
Yeah.
And I was just wondering if Susie had any input on that.
Well, yeah, so I guess it would depend on who is going to use it. If it were just for council, then, you know, you have $5 a month times 5 people. But if you want every employee to use it, now you have 55 times 5 times 12. So I don't know that it would save that much time and effort on Sandy's part, but definitely something that we can look at.
Well, I went to it and I was just paying the $5 fee because it was worth my time. It was so much easier than filling out, you know, an Excel spreadsheet and then scanning my receipts. And, you know, it did all the calculations for me. It does, you know, it just does everything for me. So I guess it just depends if people are expensing a lot. It's because I'm on all the regional boards and I have parking and I have league events. I just, you know, every month I've got a ton of expenses, and, you know, maybe other council members or other staff aren't in that boat and maybe it's not worth it. But I also, you know, I know that it does have that component where you can just import it into, you know, most accounting packages. It has the integration into, so you're not so that Sandy would not be doing, if we work it right, hopefully she wouldn't be doing double entry.
So, Madam Mayor, Madam Chair, if I could just say, please, you know, I think maybe we should look at this in a bigger picture. I'm not sure if at some point we're going to redo our travel and expense employee reimbursement. I know this council member very rarely, if any, submits any expense account. I do nowhere near the amount of traveling that you do. Or that Councilmember Cruz does. I don't think Councilmember Brigham puts anything in as well. So it might not, Susie, it might not be 5 times $5 times 12. But you know, maybe key employees and key council members can go ahead and use it. But maybe we look at it in a bigger picture of reimbursements and getting our arms around that as well. So, David, what do you think?
Mayor, Madam Chair, I do believe that, I think that's a great comment. I think there is a need to develop and bring forward a travel and training policy, in particular to ensure that the council and senior staff are in compliance with AB 1234. And a number of cities have set in place a policy, and it gives clear guidance on what the reimbursement amount is for mileage. I mean, I think a lot of things we do as practice technically would comply. It's just we haven't put it down on paper as a policy for the city, and then that it would give you. Then you develop what's the tool that you use to file those reports. And that expense file report seems like it kind of has those categories that would ensure that it's easily trackable. And you know, it's important in the context, and I know, you know, Irene's fully aware that sometimes these types of matters are subject to Public Records Act requests, and the kind of report that Councilmember Bagby submitted makes it very convenient to be able to provide that public record. So kind of 2 things. It's PRA compliance, but also having a good policy in place so that it's just clear. There's you know, takes out some of the ambiguity around what's covered, what isn't, and it ensures that we're all compliant with applicable you know, state law.
It is much neater too.
Well, maybe the individual that's submitting the report, you know, continues to pay for it and just expenses it on the expense report.
I
you
thought
know.
about that. I was like, I should be expensing this.
And then it's, you know, if they choose not to use it, they don't use it. But I think at some point we have to have some type of a policy.
Yeah.
So.
And a policy could provide for that, Mayor, is, you know, a certain amount of reimbursement for software, for example, because, you know, we do have a varied need for software, and, you know, what's acceptable, what's not is really not defined. So it becomes kind of case by case. It would be nice to at least put those kinds of things down so that, you know, council would have the flexibility to know whether it's covered or not.
And maybe we could look at, I don't know if anybody has looked into it yet, but just see if it integrates with our accounting package and if it really would be a time saver, and let's figure that out. And you know, it doesn't have to be Expensify. It could be another app. It just that's the one I found when I was like, I've had it with this Excel spreadsheet. What is out there?
Right.
Oh, this is handy. Oh, this looks good. And so I just started using it. I didn't really do a lot of in-depth research. So yeah, so if there's something available, you know, that already exists as part of our current accounting package, you know, let's look at that.
Okay.
I'm open. I mean, I'm not attached to it. It's just that it can't be Excel. Does that make sense?
Makes sense.
Okay, great. So can we, unless there's anything else, can we jump back to E in financial planning?
Absolutely. And what I'd like to do with the subcommittee, and I'll make it as quick as I can, is kind of walk through what I provided, you know, subsequent to the agenda packet going out, referred to as the COVID-19 economic resources. Highlighted on the page the companies that have provided you know, reputable information about the economic impacts and economic issues around, you know, this COVID-19 emergency. One to help give a perspective and tie into how city staff has been developing the fiscal year 2021 budget in the context of tremendous uncertainty. And really what we tried to do is, you know, compile this information and to put it into one document, you know, just for easy reference.
I think he's on the wrong agenda item.
No.
What,
That looks
are we
right.
discussing item E or are we discussing item G?
Oh. Yeah, what's the difference between E and G?
Well, so G is actually a proposal that we received from management partners to.
That's that piece that actually came with the agenda packet. There it is,
Got
guys.
it.
There
Yeah.
you go.
Got it.
Okay. Yeah, this is the separate.
All right. Sorry.
And what the staff's goal was, and that's why we call it financial planning, is to make the topic as broad as possible to facilitate conversation around you know, the financial issues that we're confronting with respect to you know, this whole COVID emergency. So let me pull it up here. So again, there are 6 different resources that are included in the document, and I'm gonna kind of just walk through them, and I'll move through fairly quickly. The first of which is a development of or is a document provided by Beacon Economics. For reference, Beacon is often the presenter at the Sonoma Economic Development Award that provides an update on the status of the economy in Sonoma County, and does that for a number of other jurisdictions. But in evaluating the impact of COVID-19 and kind of summarize here, you know, what is the economic impact? And as highlighted by the title, it says it's a case for the V. And I like to frame this and just because I think it's a kind of it makes it a little more fun, is to look at it from the acronym of LOVE. And that means an L, a U, or a V. In this case, Beacon's making a case for V. Think of L, just to think of the shape of what that looks like, is a precipitous, rapid decline followed by a long period of a lower economic activity. So kind of your L. Your U is a significant decline followed by a very slow upward climb that takes a long period of time. A V is where you experience a rapid return after kind of moving through the initial stages of the pandemic. And so, you know, there's quite a bit of discussion and debate among economists, you know, what the economic impact is going to be and look like from this emergency crisis. What Beacon kind of makes an argument for is that this is not the Great Recession that we experienced in 2008. Yes, there is significant claims for unemployment, but what we're not seeing is the massive subprime credit bubble or other bubbles that existed that crashed like we did last time. We were otherwise humming along. We weren't necessarily experiencing rapid economic growth, but we were experiencing, you know, relatively moderate economic growth, somewhere between 1.5 and 2.5%. Generally, employment was high or unemployment was low. There was a high level of corporate debt, but with that, there's also a high level of corporate earnings, and you know, the stock market was performing well, and you know, generally the economy was doing fine. And so there's a suggestion that once we get through this initial pandemic, we'll kind of rebound. Folks will go back to jobs, go back to work, and begin spending again. So that's kind of Beacon's perspective on it. You know, there's obviously a lot of wild cards. The second analysis is prepared by Dr. Eiler. Dr. Eiler's, you know, runs his own firm. He's president of Economic Forensics and Analytics, or EFA, and he's also a professor of economics at Sonoma State University. It was also used to be a professor for the MBA program. So happen to know Dr. Eiler fairly well. And he's a real analytical person, and he does a lot of analytics around economic data. A couple of things I wanted to highlight is, you know, and we believe is that you know, he calls it, the data is historically noisy, and I think, you know, we're in the midst of this response, and it's, you know, we're seeing rapid increases in unemployment because of the shelter-in-place order, but you know, there's also comes with a lot of you know, tremendous uncertainty if that's going to continue, especially as we start to move to reopen. So kind of raises it in the context of a time frame, you know, short term, medium term, and long term. And you know, short term, obviously, some of the issues that we were concerned about were you know, overloading our healthcare system. And at least so far, we've seen that it hasn't come to fruition. We've done a good job of sheltering in place. We haven't overburdened our medical system, but we're taking this cautious approach to reopening. You know, kind of in the near term, medium term, we're concerned that, you know, there might be you know, there could be potential shutdowns again if there are additional surges. And, ultimately in the long term, that could, change structurally the employment market. And, some businesses could actually, go out of business if this was a long-term event, beyond, say, 6 months. Might start to have more structural impacts, and actually some of the jobs may not rebound or return. It kind of highlights that, really where there's a particular economic impact is on tourist-related businesses, and we've seen that relative to hotels in particular, because there's no visitors that are moving about, because you have to be essential to do so, and then in some cases with restaurants where the tourists are no longer there. And Irene, if you can jump to page 33 of the slide of 68, Dr. Eiler did kind of cities at risk as duration rises. The top of the list on impacts include Healdsburg and town of Sonoma, and then the coastal areas, because their economy is so tourism based that they are particularly getting hit hard. When you look at their sales tax ratios to their population, it's almost double, whereas ours follow a lot of other cities and it's more on a 1-to-1 basis. And that's because they rely so heavily on tourism to provide sales tax dollars and TOT. And you'll see listed at the bottom is Cotati, Sebastopol, and Cloverdale. Dr. Eiler really indicates that the biggest risk is to your smaller retailers and your businesses. And that's something when we start to have a discussion later about recovery, that's probably an area that we might want to focus on is, how do we help our small business community? What are the steps we can take to really help them out? The chains are unlikely to be really, impacted significantly, and then will continue in business along with the larger retailers. So it's really the small businesses in our community that are at risk. And obviously, the longer this goes on, the more potential impacts there are to the small businesses. So, in terms of forecasts on jobs, obviously, there's, again, that uncertainty, that cloudiness, that gray area around, what's the length of this going to look like? We're going to start to see more folks go back to work, but, it's going to be partly dependent on how the COVID-19 pandemic unfolds, whether there's a resurgence or not, or whether we can really address this in a way that allows folks to go back to work without significant impacts to our economy. Obviously, the kind of a worst case is it's prolonged. You have impact to our medical community, our hospitals. The restarts slow, and then you start to have underlying structural changes in the overall mix of businesses. I guess I want to take this time just to point out that this week, Kevin has reached out to our top 25 sales tax providers in the city. And maybe Kevin, I thought this was actually kind of a bit of positive news to share with the finance admin and police subcommittee. So maybe Kevin, you can.
No, I'd be happy. I'd be happy to. It's pretty interesting. I'm really enjoying doing it, actually. As David mentioned, we get a list of our top 25, and I've just been going down the line. And just generally speaking, nobody's panicking or freaking out. Most of them are saying the worst response I got was we're down about 25%, but in a lot of cases they've said they haven't gone down at all, and in some cases they say they're busier. So these are things like retail operations. Some of the restaurants, I've gotten through to some of the restaurants. I've left a lot of messages and haven't gotten through on some of them. But just the general sentiment on all the calls I've been making is, well, you know, the first couple weeks were really bad, but things are coming back pretty strong. And, you know, a few of them in particular had not laid off anybody. Some of them had received loans from the federal government, the bridge loans and all the stimulus package. But generally speaking, it was a lot more positive, which, you know, I don't want to speculate too much, but makes me think you know, that portion of our revenue in terms of sales tax may not be as bad. I mean, obviously the TOT tax is going to be bad, but I was just really encouraged and just kind of said, hey, reaching out, seeing how you're handling all this, and just kind of saying if you need anything from us, if there's anything we can do, please let me know, giving my name and phone number, and then just kind of asking, you know, how's business been? And they seem to really appreciate it. And again, I'm enjoying doing it, so I'm going to continue this week. And yeah, that's about it. I mean, the general sentiment was that they're doing okay, and some are doing better, which is surprising.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Kevin, for your report. I thought it was refreshing to hear directly from our business community that, at least so far, given we're you know, just short of 2 months into this event, that they are still optimistic, and some seem to be positively responding, and those, I think, that are finding ways to kind of adapt to this new way of doing business. But you know, with that said, we and I'll cover this, is that we do expect that our retail sales tax numbers are going to be impacted, and we'll walk through that in a minute. Again, and particularly our TOTs. You know, right now, the other kind of important sources of revenue for the city include our permits and fees. You know, it seems like there is an interest. You know, a lot of folks are I don't know if it's because they have time or what, but they seem to be wanting to remodel their homes and go, you know, get home improvement projects underway. We during the closure, I mean, Kevin's been coordinating, you know, permit activity, but you know, hopefully that will continue as we move back to opening City Hall. You know, folks are you know, getting their permits that they're required to do, and that construction continues to kick along, because the fee revenue that they generate is an important source of funds for the city.
And just some of our top sales tax generators are directly related to the construction industry, you know, cabinets and doors and things like that. And so they, with this lifting of the allowing construction to continue, it's going to be very helpful. And they're very optimistic about that. Not in town, but just anecdotally, I've been going to Barnes Lumber. Gus, we've talked about this one. And I've been there about 3 times for my doing a fence, but I ask, hey, how's business? And they say, well, the big jobs are down, but the retail, which they actually make more money on, is through the roof. So it's just, I mean, it's pretty obvious stuff. You know, people are at home and they're trying to squeeze in little projects. And so, you know, again, Barnes is not in town, but it's right next to town, but it's, you know, their take was they're not down at all, and they may even be up a little bit, because again, they do make a little bit more off the retail versus the sort of the business to business.
Right. Well, thank you. I mean, obviously construction wasn't booming by any means in Cloverdale, but hopefully it will continue. We'll continue to see permits for improvements and for activities. Continue to move forward. The planning department continues to process them, but you know, we'll keep a close eye on that. Dr. Eiler does, you know, point out that one thing to kind of keep an eye on is property tax revenue. there's been at least some information about certain areas within California, kind of the housing markets kind of freezing up. But I think that's just because people are kind of they're sheltering in place and they're not getting out there. But interest rates are historically low. And so, I think that, especially with the shelter-in-place order changing and allowing that sector to open back up, and they're adapting as well. We'll really have to watch that carefully to see what potential impacts. We're not anticipating much impact on property tax revenue in the next fiscal year. We still anticipate that they'll be up about 3%. Just kind of, on historical growth.
Well, and actually, before we move on, David, I think the mayor had some questions. I know we've got a lot more to get through, but let's.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Kevin, I know you can't share the name of the industry, the name of the business, but can you share the industry on who's down 25%? I mean, is it restaurant, gas?
Unfortunately, it was our top generator who he did mention to me that last year they had an incredible year, and they hadn't laid anyone off, and they were back at work. One of the other ones they did close for 2 weeks, but they kept everyone on payroll, and they kind of got their place ready with PPE and distancing things in the shop. But the one who is the top, who also said they're down 25%, was very optimistic, and was looking forward to starting up again, and said they had a lot of big orders to fill. So, yeah, it's all encouraging. It's very encouraging, and I know we're going to be down, but it's just from a real micro shot of Cloverdale. It was very encouraging. All the calls I had.
Good. Thank you.
Mayor, if I can, just to add to that, we've seen kind of a tale of two stories. I mean, the construction sector within Cloverdale has seen an increase, but where we see a decrease is in the transportation and fuels. They're kind of twofold. One is, historically low prices for gas and oil, and a big portion, I think it's around 40% of our overall sales tax comes from fuel. And so, not just the pricing reductions that you're seeing, but the lower demand. I mean, that may tick back up as folks start driving again. But it seemed like there was a tremendous reduction in driving, and resulted in clear skies. But it did I think, have an impact on our fuel sales. Unfortunately, we won't see, because taxes are paid quarterly after the quarter ends, and we don't get the report for another quarter. So when we actually get reports, it's 6 months from the time that quarter ends. And unfortunately, even though we've tried, there's not really a way to get the data any sooner. So that's a challenge. On the cost side of things, and Dr. Eiler points this out, is some real concerns around increased social assistance costs. I think we've already started to hear that at the council meeting about, what about our nonprofits? And they may be challenged financially. We'll have to see how that bears it out. And then, that puts we know some of that is going to be come forward as a request to the city. And then, depending on what the stock market does, what's going to be the impact on our pension liabilities and pension obligations. We know, again, that during the 2008, there was a tremendous loss, and it took quite a while to even get back a portion of those losses. It gets back to that L, U, and V. How are we going to return, and whether the stock market's going to follow? And that's kind of a long-term impact is going to be on potential our unfunded liabilities, and so that's something, again, we'll just have to keep. I know, Madam Chair, you've had your eye on that, and I'm sure as the dust settles, we're going to have to see what the impacts look like on the equity markets, and then ultimately what the impact is to our our pension liability.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to my next League of Cities Government's Transparency and Labor Relations meeting. It's it's going to be interesting. But actually, I had a question for, well, I guess it's going to be Kevin, David, and Susie. I mean, from what I'm hearing, I mean, and this, what you're saying is very consistent with what I'm hearing from the other cities on those semi-weekly legislative calls, is that Sonoma and Healdsburg are desperate. I mean, the city of Healdsburg pays for their community services through their TOT. I mean, that's, so they are struggling to figure out how they're going to make up for these budget shortfalls. And I've, kind of been saying, well, we don't really depend on TOT and sales tax, where, sales taxes, it's important, but, we're really about the property tax. And depending on what the nature of the recovery looks like, if property values plummet, that's where we're going to really be hurting. If there's a second or third wave, just depending on what the recovery, the shape of the recovery is, that's where we, could really be challenged. But what's occurred to me with what you're talking about with the decrease in revenue from fuel sales, because, we're a commuting city. I just got quoted in the Press Democrat. I'm sure, some of you saw it. It's like, yeah, well, we love the fact that they just were repaving the 101 because we're tired of getting jostled and bumped around. We pay more for car repairs, the worst shape the 101 is in, because we drive the farthest. That's our highest, we pay for fuel, and that's our highest contributor to greenhouse gases, is the fact that we're a commuter town. But what I'm also hearing is that with everybody staying home and working from home, that our leakage problem is being taken care of. So, my kind of long-term question is, as far as, future policy decisions is that, yeah, we love the gas. We love the income from the fact that we've got a bunch of commuters here and they're buying a lot of fuel here. But if they weren't having to travel for work, they'd all be doing their shopping here. And so how, where's the break-even point on that?
Yeah, Madam Chair, that's a great question. And unfortunately, we don't have the benefit of a econometric model that we could really look at, because I think what you're seeing is absolutely the case. Is folks are staying home and they're buying stuff more locally than they might.
And they're not going to Lowe's, and they're not going to Home Depot. They're going to Ace, or they're probably going Barnes, and we don't see revenue from that. We would if Gus had his way. So go Gus.
Right. To your point, this is an opportunity, especially when we talk about recovery, and we coordinate with the Chamber and NINA and the Economic Development Board. We pursue a strategy of why it's so important to shop local. I mean, I think folks understand it, they get it, they see it, they're participating in it. But to reinforce that, and how do we do that to really encourage folks to stay?
It's the age-old question, though. The problem is that we can tell them that, how important that is, as much as we want to, but the fact is that they're going to shop where they work.
Yeah. Well, that's why it certainly will require a multifaceted strategy. And the other aspect that I've seen, you see a lot on social media, is this move towards the maker economy.
Yeah.
Some folks have responded, and to out of this emergency is people have developed this entrepreneurial period. And, you know, what can we do to foster and support that, so that, you know, more folks are, as we stop buying, you know, goods from you know, the East. Why can't we make and sell more things locally, you know, and keep those dollars here and keep those jobs here? I mean, those are all things it's a slow process. It takes a while, but maybe we can do things to help integrate that into our community, to facilitate that you know, that paradigm shift.
Yeah, and you know, it's really nice to be able to say shop local, but you have to have the products too. I mean, when I run into people down at Walmart or wherever I may be, you know, and you look in their baskets, it's stuff that you really can't get in Cloverdale. Not everybody wears the same size shoes or likes the same color shirts, so it's really a challenge. And that was always the problem with the leakage. What was leaking was products that they couldn't, needless to say, products they couldn't buy in Cloverdale. And, you know, it's understandable why the merchants can't supply or have in stock everything that people may want. So
there is the one positive upside to the move towards the e-commerce, and that's called the Wayfair decision. And it's a little bit of a saving grace for us in Cloverdale, and it's recognized in our sales tax data. Is now that decision has been made, more of those online sales, assuming people are actually paying their sales tax, are going to come back to the county of origin and the city. So we've seen in our data, and again, it's one of these things that's just newly developing, so we don't have a good trend analysis performed. But that's kind of, I mean, even the traditional Walmarts are you know, impacted by this e-commerce trend. So, you know, but you know, how do we leverage that in a way that makes sense for us, is something that I think we can, again, you know, it's a future discussion.
If there are any other questions, I guess you need to move on to another section. We're not quite
okay, so move on. There's some information in the resource package from HDL. HDL Companies is one of two companies that provides sales tax data for municipalities. We happen to use Muni Services or Avenue, but HDL is also a very well-recognized company, and they do a lot of forecasts. What they've done, and Irene, if you can move to page 49 of 68, is they've done forecasts by sector, and these are the same sectors that we use are part of our report, and you can see where they're showing impacts are identifying impacts is in, you know, the first quarter of 2020, which is, you know, January through March, where, you know, we kind of started to go into shutdown phase, you know, mid-March, and maybe, you know, for some a little sooner than that, but the majority of the impacts are in the second quarter, which is, you know, the period we're in now, April to June, and then starting to look at kind of what's the overall impact next fiscal year. So there's kind of this, you'll see it in this model that we developed, or this forecast we prepared based on a model that was developed by another municipality, that really shows, you know, the most significantly impacted quarter is that second quarter of this year, what we're in right now because of the significant shelter in place. You know, overall, starting to see next fiscal year a trend back to some business as usual. Again, there's tremendous uncertainty, obviously, because no one really knows or has a good sense of you know, how this is ultimately gonna play out, and there's, you know, different perspectives on all sides. But I wanted to share this because this is kind of a sector analysis that was done, and you know, pretty well respected. what they show, and this is on page 49, is statewide, down 3.6% in Q1, down almost 15% in Q2, and then down about 1.6 next fiscal year, and that's based on these on their sector analysis. So it's a good reference source. It follows that is Avenue, which is formerly Muni Services. And what they tend to do is offer conservative and optimistic predictions, based on different stages of the pandemic and timing, and it pretty closely follows the recommendations by HDL, though they do recognize that there's going to the higher unemployment rate is probably going to have a higher level of decline in sales tax, and that's on page, let's see, 53. Well, so moving on, just to talk a little bit about response to COVID-19 impacts. I put this in here because I think it kind of spoke to me, and I think it's a useful guide. Some of the things that what are we contending with, and how do we address it, and what should we be concerned about? Realistically, a vaccine is at least 12 months away. We're pretty certain that there's going to be impacts on sales tax, TOT, and some of the user fees and charges that we collect. We don't readily have policies developed and in place, for this type of event. What we don't know is, how long this crisis is going to go on, or how long this emergency is going to last, what the final impact on revenues are, and how hard they'll be hit. We've already talked about it. The things that we're going to be concerned about is sales tax, TOT, those user charges, those fees and permits, and if it's more long-term property taxes. And Irene, if you could go to 58 of 68. Next one. So these are some recommended actions that are things we should try to accomplish. That includes preserve reserves, and we're going to talk a little bit about that when you look at our budget numbers. If this was a prolonged event, obviously we would come to rely on those reserves down the road to be able to maintain, our services. Obviously, that's the second action there: maintain services. And focus on what's important. And so, one of the things that staff had done, had been working on previous to this, was to identify what are all of the kind of mandatory and priority services. And we hadn't brought that to council yet, but I think that's a conversation we need to have, is, really focus and hone our staff on those on the priorities. I know, Madam Chair, in conversations we said, let's focus on finances. Let's really look to make sure that we are able to weather this storm. And so, what are the things you'd like us to see us do as staff to focus on maintaining our services, and maybe eliminate or reduce non-essential services. Certainly, one of the things that my goal is, I feel like staff is pretty darn lean at the city of Cloverdale, and our employees are key to getting things done. Really will work to keep our employees, and try to limit, but if needed, use furloughs or part-time or other ways to reduce expenses. This brings me to one thing I wanted to share with the Finance and Police Subcommittee is, we had this conversation around our 2 temporary part-time park staff. And I, of course, was immediately concerned because, I don't want to forego, potential savings and salaries and wages for, critical functions. But we had a conversation, and through that conversation realized that, our part-time park staff are funded through the Measure M sales tax. And so after looking at that, and Susie did an analysis, we can continue to fund those positions with that particular sales tax measure, without any burden on the general fund. And so it was my intent, for example, to look to continue those 2 part-time staff, because there's so much work that needs to get done. Again, getting back to that weed maintenance, landscape maintenance, that I know our community so enjoys. And I say that because I think we're able to do it without any real impact to our general fund because of the nature of the funding source. So those are the kind of things that we'll be looking to is how can we leverage special funding sources to ensure we keep employees retained, because we are such a small staff. But I guess I just want to just pause for a second and just check in with you, Madam Chair and Mayor, if you have any thoughts on that.
Mr. Mayor, did you have anything?
Well, it's pretty interesting to read that, in the second quarter, restaurant sales are down 65%. That's going to be pretty significant to overcome. And then I guess the other thing that kind of jumps out at is under reserves. It says may need reserves to last for up to 7 years.
Several years.
Yeah, several years. Well, we're going to be lucky if we can last 1 year with our reserves, but I don't know. That's going to be a challenge, and we need to discipline ourselves to know that we can't spend our reserves all in 1 or 2 years.
I agree. And I apologize for this slow process and overview. I just wanted to make sure that we gave you a lot of background and context, because we're gonna get to that, and so we'll be able to give you a direct perspective on where our anticipated fund balance is going to be, and then you can give feedback. And that's why I wanted to make sure you kind of had this as context. And I think this is information that I'd like to make sure that the council as a whole has it, just so that they can digest it as well, just because I think it's good information. There are.
I have 2 questions, but whenever you're ready.
Yeah, I'm ready.
Okay, are you sure?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So my first question is, specifically in regards to diminished capacity for fire prevention at the city level. I know that in my discussions with Sonoma County Legislative Group with Senator McGuire, Senator Dodd, from the very beginning of this, they were very vocal, and they were saying, we want to let you know at the state level, we are already having discussions and trying to figure out what does a fire evacuation look like in the midst of a stay-at-home order. So they assured us, it was probably early April. I'd have to go back and look at the date, but it was really right at the beginning of this crisis. They assured us that this is something that they are talking about, looking at. So I just wanted to, but we're not hearing a lot of information about it in the news. Case in point, the Press Democrat article about, which was a little bit of Chicken Little. Oh my gosh, we're at stay-at-home orders, and we don't have fire suppression, and it kind of didn't delve into what is happening at the state level. So I'm wondering what you're hearing at the staff level from county and, you know, maybe in any interactions with the state about how we're going to, you know, address that issue.
Honestly, I haven't heard much on that issue. I think we've been, you know, so inundated on this COVID-19 issue that, you know, it's been maybe put kind of as a lower priority. But I think as we move through spring and into summer here, it's going to quickly become a higher priority. And you know, you're right. I mean, it requires you know, significant amount of staffing resources to try to manage that, and without the assistance of, you know, the work groups to help us or funding to pay for other needs. You know, it's you know, something we're really going to have a conversation about to come up with you know, potential strategies.
Right.
I do know that, you know, the chief is very cognizant of the need for evacuation plans, and you know, the issue is, you know, there's no one evacuation plan because it's going to depend on the situation. And so we have to be, I think, careful about putting something out there that says, you know, use this route, when depending on the situation, that may not be the route that you actually want to provide them. So I know people are looking for that, and that's something actually I'd hoped to have a conversation about with the community when we were developing the resiliency plan, to kind of have a more, come up with, actually have a discussion around it, but we didn't quite get there.
And I guess I asked that specifically because I think that the letter that we sent to Assemblymember Wood and Senator McGuire, it was more, you know, this is how much COVID has cost us. It doesn't really look forward into the near future and address those staffing, the fire safety staffing issues.
Right.
And I think we need to, if we haven't, we need to start lobbying on that and letting them know that. And so in that, I need numbers. I need that, you know, this is how many hours it's costing us because we're behind because of the COVID-19 restrictions on the kind of landscaping maintenance we could do. Then, you know, we couldn't hire back, you know, furlough or, you know, seasonal workers because we had to make sure we had vehicles and PPE. So that put us this far behind. Now we don't have the con crew, which represents this many hours. So I think that we need to start assembling that. And it doesn't have to be that complicated. It can be those like 3 or 4 bullets. We need to start sending this off and letting him know, this is what we don't have, and this is what we need. So who's ringing?
It's me.
It's not me. Okay.
Sorry.
So then, sorry, Sue. We're sorry if we're keeping you. And then the second thing I had is that, you know, it may not be appropriate to bring it up now. We might need to bring it up at the end of the meeting. But what I'm hearing is that, you know, we've already been talking about local sources of revenue. And, you know, because of COVID-19, I mean, I'm going to have a meeting this week with SCTA, you know, Measure M renewal, which is a separate Measure M. It's the roads tax. So the roads tax is going to be in the same shape as, like, you know, it's going to be in the doldrums for quite a while, just like our sales tax was. And the fact is that there's a lot of sentiment. I don't know what's going to happen at the board meeting, but there's a lot of sentiment against putting that Measure M, the transportation renewal, on the ballot this year, which actually gives us an opportunity as a community to put our own sales tax ballot on the November ballot. But we have to start talking about it now, because here's the thing: is that we're not, if we measure the Measure M revenue for roads that we get from the county is going to be, you know, it's going to be pretty bad. We're not going to get a lot of money from that because of reduced fuel sales. So maybe this is the time for us as a community to say we need to be a self-help community on roads and other issues, and specifically community development. And I know that this is something that's near and dear to the mayor's heart. I would love to hear him weigh in on this, but I mean, and I'm probably going to get in trouble because this is not exactly on the agenda, but this is exactly what's on the agenda. Is how are we going to preserve reserves, maintain services, and keep employees? We have to have revenue. So.
You know, Madam Chair, I couldn't agree with you more. And I think now's the time to do it in the sense that from a local standpoint, we're seeing the big pave. So we're actually seeing dollars at work. Now, granted, they're not the same dollars that we're going to be going after. Also, it's important that when we get our sales tax initiative on that ballot, that we do something similar to what Hillsburg did. They're funding their loan program to their retailers with money from a sales tax, quarter-cent sales tax, that specifically is to be used for public safety, road improvements within the city, and economic development. And I think that economic development is a key to be one of the uses of any sales tax that we do, because it has such a broad brush of things that we could do with that funding. So yeah, I really think we as a city have to go to the ballot as quickly as we can for that sales tax. And I think it's got to be that 1%, David.
Okay. Well, and council has approved the contract to start the survey work, and what I'm hearing is, move quickly to get that work implemented to get, to be able to help inform decision making around what's the appropriate measures to place on the ballot. So that direction is clear. Again, council's already approved it, so we'll get started on that right away.
And we're talking about the utility tax renewal as well as
yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. Great.
No sunset on that one.
Yes, Susie.
I just wanted to say that I've been playing around with the module that was created by Management Partners last time, and really looking like if we did a 1% or 3/4% or 0.5% increase or salary, good grief, sales tax ballot measure, what would that look like? And it makes an amazing difference.
Yeah.
And I think we go for the 1%. I mean, we can't be bashful. And we have a great.
The polling going to tell us
Yeah.
a lot. And
Sure.
I think you're absolutely right. I mean, we've seen a lot of benefit in Cloverdale from the county-wide measures. We benefit from the parks measure, which allows us Hector to get his seasonal staffing. We benefit from the road tax, except that we won't now because it's based on it's a gas tax.
Yeah.
So it's an opportunity for us to tax people, but actually reinvest in our local community, knowing that the money's going to stay in town. The money's going to stay with our community.
Yeah, and that's what I'm talking about. Now's the time to strike. I mean, if you look at the 17 fires and you look at the 18 fires, I mean, it's like we had to be self-sufficient. There's absolutely no way we could rely on the rest of the county. And we need that 1% to be self-sufficient. We're an island up here in Cloverdale. And when there's a county-wide disaster, we're on our own. So.
Well, and with that, I'm reminded of, being at the presentation this past year at League of Cities that was done jointly by the city of Santa Rosa and the city of Malibu. And, Santa Rosa is my hometown and Malibu is where I went to college. And the city manager of Malibu was, when it was her turn to stand up and talk, she said, when it was our turn to make the call, there was no one left to come. You know, and that's where we could potentially be very easily. Yeah. I mean, if, you know, if last year, if things, you know, knock on wood, if things hadn't been different, if the wind didn't continue to go, you know, southwest, we very easily could have been, you know, caught up in not just not just the power outages, but the fires too. So I think you're right, Gus, is that we just have to be self-sufficient in every way.
And that's what we have to sell.
Yeah. And I think people understand that. We're all right. Pretty well understood. So where do you want to continue? So sorry to, hopefully I didn't derail your presentation, but I mean, if you're asking me what actions we need to accomplish in order to do that, we're going to need revenue.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's certainly, that's not highlighted here, but that's duly noted and certainly right on in terms of it's something we need to do is to target revenue, and you know, ballot measure and other means is something we can certainly look at. And so that's just clear. We'll move forward. We're getting the survey firm moving forward, and you know, get that work so we can start informing council on how we might want to approach the ballot.
Yeah, I wanted to make sure to bring that up now so that we need to get that to council at the next meeting.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, if you can advance the slides. Just one. Okay. Thank you. All right. Actually, go one more. Sorry.
I don't know. I like the we're in the business of managing risk line.
Right. Well, that's
Not taking risks.
Yeah. Keep going. Keep going to what we need to do.
Oh, we're gonna cut to the chase. Okay, I like it.
These are good examples. We can review these. These aren't necessarily Cloverdale. If you can go to page 63. Okay, so some of the things, and this is exactly what we're going to talk about: evaluate major revenue sources and expense categories, model what if scenarios. We're going to talk a little bit about that today, and that's part of what the scope of work that's included in your packet does. You know, we want to, I think the second bullet is really around communication, create consensus with council, commission, or board. We need to understand what the impacts are from the recession and what the impacts might be from this emergency, and create an action plan. And I think, you know, as we pivot to recovery and later on in the agenda, you know, I tried to make it and put as much broad ideas into that so that we could start to develop an action plan, because I think it's going to be step by step, and there are various parameters and things that we need to work within. Obviously, as part of going to the voters, we really do need to share with the community, you know, our revenue vulnerability, and why a tax measure is going to be so important. You know, this next year, we will be opening up labor negotiations with our labor unions. And you know, it's going to be something where we really need to take a look at the long-term labor costs to the city, and understand what those cost impacts are, and you know, have you know, and a transparent discussion around you know, what wages and benefits costs, and you know, how the budget would need to align to you know, keep our staff employed and our wages and salaries competitive. So if I can, next slide. So some of the things that at least this presentation identifies, and these are pretty dramatic actions, and I'm not proposing that we consider those, all of them now, but I do think it's important to for the subcommittee and the council just to be aware of these and what they look like. You know, his here, eliminate all leave cash outs. Those are things that are provided for in our MOU. We do have a cost of living adjustment that goes into effect July 1. So council, if there's strong feelings, could request that we put those on hold. That would require us to negotiate very quickly with our labor groups. There is the option to implement furloughs. We really have not done that. We've endeavored to keep everybody working under the shelter-in-place order as best we can. There really is no one not working. They're just working at reduced levels to ensure we're physical distancing. But this last one here, put non-mission critical contracts on hold. We have been looking at those internally as staff just to see are there any contracts that we may want to hold off on. One of the things, I'm going to say this very cautiously because I know there's the council feels strongly about this. One that came up was rubber mulch. Some staff said, is that mission critical? And I said, well, council has given us direction, but that's an example. I'm not advocating it for it one way or the other. I just say that as that's an example of a contract that we have that costs general fund money that we are otherwise obligated to do. But those are things, those are again, those are actions that council could look at if we wanted to, generate some cost savings. So I won't spend too much more time there. What I really want to do now is to, with all that context and background, delve into, and this will be the Susie hour, to provide an overview of our projected fiscal year 2021 budget. And Susie, before you jump in on the budget highlights, maybe could you scroll down to page 4? So what we did, we used a model to help inform our revenue forecasts, and which Susie will touch on when she talks about our budget, because the budget numbers basically reflect what we show here. So the model identifies 3 phases. The first phase is the shelter-in-place order, so that assumes starting March 15th and runs through June 30th, so 3.5 months, followed by kind of an early recovery phase where there's still impacts, but things are starting to normalize to a certain extent, but we're not back to normal. And so that would be from like July 1 to December 30th. And again, that's the new fiscal year. And then, kind of a late recovery period of about a year. And so that would be, January 1, 2021 to December 31st of 2021, which takes us into the next fiscal year. So we're looking at, about a 21.5 month period. And what this does is show you revenue loss by revenue category by fiscal year. And so, kind of the big one is a sales tax. So you can see the phasing there, under the shelter phase, we're estimating that, there's a 60% in sales tax revenue, which generates, a loss of about $202,000 for that 3.5 month period. I really do view that as a worst case scenario. I think we probably aren't going to lose quite that much. So it's a little bit more on the conservative side. But for instance, Madam Chair and Mayor, you could say, gosh, why don't we assume we lose 50%? And so I could literally type in 50% and it'll adjust that whole model. So I can provide this to you, and you can look at different scenarios. But what we did is we took this model and it helped inform the revenue that Susie speak to for the fiscal year 2021 budget. And so I just wanted to share with council that we really did try to take as much as we could a sector by revenue category by revenue category perspective look at the impact of this emergency on our revenue sources. The second one is TOT. Obviously we do believe that during the shelter in place, it's accurate to say 95% of the revenue is going to be a loss. But then when you look at early recovery, is it reasonable to assume starting July 1 that we're going to be back to about 50% of our normal occupancy at our hotels? That might be a little bit optimistic for that period of time, especially if the event is prolonged. But you can see readily kind of where what the impacts are through this emergency, on these different time frames and periods, and we can adjust this with your input. So I just wanted to give you this perspective. It's attached to the analysis, the budget work that Susie worked so hard on, but you can kind of walk through this and see what we anticipated, were the impacts, so rolled up, over the 21-month period. I mean, we project, $835,000 loss in revenue because of the impacts on our revenue categories. So and then it breaks it down by fiscal year. So I won't go into this any more deeper than that. I just wanted to share with you that this is directly tied to our the numbers are right out of the adopted fiscal year 1920 budget, and then when you scroll down to the second page, you can see other general fund revenue sources. So page 2, and those how they the projected impacts for this year's budget as well as next year's budget. So with that said, sorry, Susie, I was going to turn it over to you sooner than that. I just wanted to tie into the revenue piece so that when it makes sense when you're going through the budget.
Yeah, no problem.
Can I just ask one question before we get started? On the sales tax revenue, where we're projecting a 60%.
Yes.
Loss. When I look at this slide here, it's saying, where did we get the 60% from?
The mayor, 60% is an estimate of just the impact and decline in economic activity during from the period of March 15th through June 30th.
Okay, because I'm looking at this here, and it's saying a 50% decrease in taxable sales for 2 months will result in an 8.4 decrease for the year. So I don't know. I mean, I'd rather plan, for a bigger loss, and if it comes in last year, we look good. But I'm just not sure that where the percentages are coming from. I have to get my head around that. So.
Right, and each one of those percentages, Mayor, can be adjusted. For example, the shelter phase for sales tax. As Kevin reported earlier, some retailers and some restaurants are saying, "Hey, we're doing pretty good,"
Yeah.
But others we know were shuttered. So, that's something we can readily adjust. When I did the analysis, and you see it just up above revenue there, 17.5%. What that reduction resulted in was an overall annual reduction of 17.5%. for the year. Now, I actually think that's conservative in meaning we're overestimating slightly the losses on the sales tax side, but I feel like we're underestimating on the TOT. So again, this is something that, you know, I think as decision makers, you could kind of, you know, go through this and say, well, I think during shelter in phase, we're only going to lose 50%. And then we can run that. If I was sitting down and we were sitting in the office, I would have this be interactive and we could play with it, and not play with it, but live adjust those numbers and see what the impact looks like.
Yeah, well, I just don't want to adjust the numbers till we feel good. I mean, I just want to know where the percentages are coming from, and how do we justify a 60% over a 50 or 40%. So,
right, and remember,
but I'll wait and look at it, and
okay,
as we go through.
And Mayor, I'm happy to walk through. You know, you and I can send you the spreadsheet, and the Mayor as well. We can walk through this and modify it. Again, that 60% was only during that shelter phase. So
Okay.
you know, 40% reduction in activity. And you know, it's a pretty high, or actually a 60% reduction. That's a pretty high reduction, and for us, it may not be that high. So I kind of view that particular category as being as kind of worst case, guys, on that one.
Okay.
So,
yeah, it's worst case. I mean, I think for phase, because we're not going to know, but you know, it's also a projection, so we'll know soon. But it's also it's going to be, the different sectors are going to balance each other out. You know?
They very well could. And that's where what it tried to focus on was those revenues that will be affected by what we think will be affected by the you know, the COVID-19 emergency. There's certainly other ones that you know, like general taxes, some of the property taxes we don't expect will really be impacted. But you know, I guess where it does factor in is a discussion, as we did earlier today, is on all those other fees. Is, you start looking at cannabis fees, you start looking at TOT, all those fees add up to mean something for our budget. So even simple reductions in one thing can have greater impacts when part of the whole.
Well, and the one thing that I don't want to see us do is all of a sudden jump to what you can't prepare to do now, where we start negotiating with our bargaining units. I mean, yeah, it may come to that point, but I don't want staff, you know, being overly concerned at this point. I mean, I don't know.
Oh, I of course I appreciate that comment, Mayor, but I guess I feel like it's my role and responsibility to just to make sure that you're aware that's out there. And I'm not saying you're advocating.
Gotcha.
Just it's a tool that you have available, and it's obviously it's a drastic tool. You know, not advocating for it. It's just, you know, other cities are in that position where they're going to be cutting positions, and I hope, frankly, we don't have to do that, and we weather the storm well because of our unique position, you know, but this may be something, you know, as this emergency evolves, that we have to take a you know, we may have to relook at these things at different times.
Okay.
But okay, Irene or Sue, maybe if you can back up to page 1 of this slide, and then I'm actually, at this point, I'm gonna turn it over to Susie. So Susie, you can walk.
I just want to reiterate that this sales tax number, that 60%, it also is very close to the number that Muni Services suggested was going to be our income. So although I can't remember exactly where this number came from, we did double check and make sure that it does correspond with Muni Services assumptions.
Yeah, Susie, real quick, on that point, I mean, and that's why, Mayor, what we wanted to do is, look at all of these data sources as a whole and try to help it gather as best we can all the information to help inform the data. So we didn't want to try to do it in a vacuum. And we did do these double checks against these other just to kind of see, are we in the neighborhood? Are we off? Are we on? And it seemed to suggest we were in the ballpark.
Okay.
Okay, so that's how we developed the revenue, the general fund revenue portion of our budget. We just went through all that. For the expenses, we took 2 passes at the expenses this year. Met with each department virtually and went through, what do you think you're going to spend the remainder of the year, and then what do you need, what do you absolutely need for next year? And then we created a discretionary list of everything that is needed but could be pushed off or could wait. And you can see, I don't have it in front of me, sorry. We decreased the total expenditures by $88,000, but when we also decreased the revenue by, I think it was $580,000. And we already came in with this budget, and that was budget to budget, right? We already came in with a budget of $758,000 deficit, or using reserves. That's a better way of saying it. If you using $758,000 worth of our reserves for the general fund, now we're adding another 580 plus less the 88. So we have about 1.2 million that we're going to have to make up using reserves next year. That also leaves, I'm just going to do really high, but it leaves the general fund reserve balance of 41% still, even using those reserves, because we came into this year with $1.3 million increase in our reserves. I can go through these by line item if you'd like, but I don't think you probably want to do that.
I'm fine not going through it with a line item, Madam Chair. This is something that I think we're not going to digest this in 5 or 10 minutes.
Yeah.
I mean, it's going to take a while to look at it and come up with some questions, and then meet with David or Susie one-on-one for the answers. But I would like to make sure that this gets out to the other council members so they have a chance to digest it as well.
Yeah.
Okay. And then I also just want to point out one more thing, and that this does not include $248,000 worth of the discretionary items. Remember the things that I said I thought that the directors thought could be either held off for a year or, but they really would like to have them. And that is on page 3 of 5.
Okay.
And it's the discretionary list, and it's everything from vehicles to the HVAC replacement at the senior center and a re-roof of the courtyard office. And
Yeah.
there you go.
Been waiting a long time for some of that stuff.
Yeah, and so I recognize that a lot of this is important stuff. So I wanted to keep that also, but I mean, there's a mixed bag. Do you keep using your reserves down or, yeah.
I hear you, Susie.
Okay.
Yeah, and the I mean, there's kind of twofold impacts. One is the decline in revenues that we're expecting to see, and I think overall it's in excess of about $500,000 in declines in revenue from year over year, and then the other part of that is just an increase in costs related to healthcare premiums, staffing costs, our liability program costs that are going up. But even with that, we did come in with a reduction in the overall total departmental request that we were submitting. So it does have it does result in order to balance the budget, use of reserve. The health or the beneficial aspect is that we transferred in as Susie mentioned, 1.3 into our general fund balance at the completion of the audit, and then we fulfilled our reserve. So our reserves basically are projected to be greater at the end of 2021 than they were at the beginning of July 1. Not by a significant amount, but still by about $70,000. So it kind of twofold is decline in revenue, and then a corresponding increase in costs, which have a multiplying impact on the budget. So it's obviously it would not be sustainable to continue in this fashion, into the future. But as it currently provided for, we could weather the storm, I think, and land okay based on the current budget projections. The other message that I wanted to share that we haven't done yet is we're going to explore where there's opportunities to generate additional savings to the general fund. One example is we contribute general fund to like the Vintage Meadows Landscape and Lighting District, and we believe we're required to do that. But one of the expenses in that L&L is for playgrounds and playground repairs. Can we use some of those Measure M sales tax revenues to contribute to that L&L for those playground repairs? Again, maybe it's only $25,000, but it's $25,000. So we staff still needs to strategize on looking for those kinds of solutions so we can again reduce the impact on the general fund. And our goal today was really was a big data information sharing exercise. I realize that this needs to be digested by subcommittee members and council members, but because of all the stuff we're in, it's been challenging to have those discussions with council, and we saw this as a venue to try to get that out, get this information to you. So that's an end of report, Madam Chair.
Great, thank you. Mr. Mayor, did you have any concluding remarks or?
Nope, I'm good.
Okay. Yes, I just want to say thank you for all the hard work, and I'm really glad we got the casting software for Susie, because it's getting put to work, put to good use. And I mean, I don't want to be too optimistic, but of course, we're doing all of this not knowing if stimulus money is going to become available. So I like the approach of we're just going to march forward assuming there isn't going to be anything like that. And then if it does appear, then that will be a happy day. As much as I, love to hear talk of federal stimulus dollars for, for our aging infrastructure, which we were hard pressed to maintain before this crisis. So I guess, yeah, we'll just move forward and hope for the best.
Yeah.
That's what we always do. Were there any comments from the public at this time? Do we have anything, Irene? Any hands raised?
Currently, there are no hand raised.
Okay, great.
Oh, wait,
Right.
yes, I'm sorry.
There we
Nina, so let me allow her.
Welcome, Nina.
I know
Okay.
I've been extremely quiet. Wait. I've been extremely quiet because I wasn't sure if I was on. I mean, I heard everything, but I didn't weigh in. This is an amazing effort from city staff and from all of you. It boggles the mind, and I'll do everything in my power to help support and promote all of the tax initiatives that we're going to have to really roll up our shirt sleeves and promote, and to tell people why and what the best case scenario is and what the worst case scenario. So I just wanted to say that I'm exhausted. Yeah. Good job, Susie.
No, and you're a key partner in all of this moving forward. And yeah, thank you for acknowledging the hard work of staff.
Oh.
This is really monumental.
And it's real, and it's not just we're gonna wish for the best, and it's like this is what happens when we don't have anything else to rely on. But one of the things that I was kind of told a while ago, and I think David told me, he said, Cloverdale has always been sort of the low man on the totem pole in terms of city sales tax revenues as well as TOT, and maybe that in the long run is going to make this a little bit better for us.
Yeah. I think
So-
that's definitely the impression that I get on the calls with all of the other cities. Santa Rosa is really going to be hurting. They have like 40% of their budget is sales tax revenue. That's where all the big box store is. That's where the car dealerships
Where the
are.
automobile dealers are, yeah, all of
Yeah,
that.
they're really hurting. They're really in a bad position, and
So
yeah, we're less bad.
and that might work to our advantage.
I work for advantage.
Always
so,
hopeful.
yeah. And I just had one follow-up question too. It just is in regards to the permits and the fees collection. I just want to make sure, just like we're kind of going to move forward with automating our expenses and how we track that. Can we revisit looking at, it's like, what's it costing us to not have those permit and planning services online?
Right.
It's in the budget. I did make a call today to try to get an updated number on the one that David had worked on a couple years ago that everyone seemed to like. So I'm still waiting for that revised number, but it's on the list, and I do think it's important, and I've seen how good it can work, and our building inspector is interested in it too. So yeah, I think will make us more efficient and probably get more revenue, because people will be able to do it easier instead of just saying, well, can't get in there, so I won't get a permit.
Yeah. I mean, and if a lot of people are, even if they're staying home and they're doing remodels, and even when they go back to work, it's hard to get into City Hall, if you live here but don't work in town. So we'll figure out if that pencils out. So anything else, Gus?
No, I'm good, thank you.
Okay. So I guess, should we go ahead and move on to the next item, which I believe we're on item H. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Actually, it's the proposal by management partner.
I was just going to hope that no one noticed, actually. Okay, I see.
This was a proposal that, because management partners developed the financial forecasting tool that, we presented to council, and Sue's been working with them on getting training on the tool, and this was an additional scope of work that they obtained to help us address specifically the COVID-19 emergency. I thought it was a pretty good proposal. We certainly can refine it more, but wanted to bring it to council. We have funding within our current budget, and I'll have to check to see if Susie put that in carryover revenue or not. But we can fund it in the current year budget because we have funds for management partners to assist us. But just wanted to make sure that the Finance, Admin, and Police Subcommittee was aware of this proposal and whether we had your support to move forward.
So the most the fee is going to be, if I'm reading this correctly, is 24,000.
That's correct.
Actually 25. Okay.
Yeah. And how did they roll that in, Susie, or with the current crisis? Did they sort of roll it in with the previous proposal?
They said that they would add this into, this module would be like an updated module. They would update the module that we currently have. That's why it's less expensive this time than it was last time.
Oh, that makes sense. Yeah, it looks good. All right. Any further discussion?
No.
Any comments?
Nope.
All right. Now we get to go to H. Yay. Discussion initial steps for reopening and recovery.
All right. Well, just I know I feel like we're all kind of information overload with respect to it almost seems like daily or almost like hourly updates on the status of COVID-19 emergency. And so I won't go into details on everything that has transpired over, seems like something new every day. But I guess the key news is that the Governor Newsom has announced that we're really, I think, transitioning to phase 2, which is reopening. And what I think is going to be so critical to success of opening and recovery is to work with our business community to ensure that they've got procedures and protocols in place to enable them to effectively open back up safely. And I'll use City Hall as an example. We've been talking about it with staff. How do we reopen to the community and reopen to the public and do it in a way that ensures that our city staff can do their jobs, safely and effectively. And I think that's the same exercise that the business community is going to have to do. We know there's a lot of interpretation of the shelter in place, and I think that's a function of us all working together to be creative. There may be things that may not perfectly fit in our zoning ordinance that we look at to facilitate allowing businesses to function. I think we have a lot of things like outdoor dining and things like that are already really well supported, because that seems like an area that is going to be critical to recovery for restaurants is the outdoor dining piece. I heard, for example, Fieldsburg was going to look at maybe closing the plaza and opening up those restaurants. So, that's kind of unprecedented for them because a lot of people drive and do all that. Those are the kinds of things we might maybe want to look at as, closing First Street or having periods of time where the boulevard's closed. We open up restaurants, we open up business, and we allow them to to be to meet their physical distancing requirements. I'm not here to suggest we talk about all those things, but I guess as part of transitioning to recovery, it doesn't appear like it's going to be automatically business as usual. It's going to be, employ protocols, employ procedures, and move in a way to get businesses back open. So,
actually, on that note, I wonder, when the next planning subcommittee is, and if we could direct them to take up those issues, those adaptations to the updated orders. Because I've had it suggested to me as well, possibly closing First Street, when Wolf House, I don't think they were going to be open on St. Patrick's Day anyway. Let's put it that way. But they're making a lot of progress. So, ideas about how we could close First Street, or help Papa's with an event or something like that, or other restaurants on the boulevard or otherwise. But if we could maybe send that to I don't know where it would be appropriate, either planning or public works.
Chamber.
Pardon me, Gus? Do you want to take a red pen to it, Gus?
No, I was just going to say the chamber.
The chamber, okay. Oh, actually, maybe Nina, it's something that Nina could work on and just bring some suggestions. But I think if we just go ahead and say, send it to an appropriate subcommittee right now.
Right.
Let's just cut to the chase, because we want to respond. Yeah, we want to respond and respond quickly when we can.
And Nina does have comments if this is the time.
Yeah, let's hear it.
Go ahead, Nina.
Sorry, I unmute there. Would this be like a one-time occasion, or would it be an ongoing kind of thing, or at intervals? I mean, what's the picture? I think it's a great idea. I think lots of places in Europe are doing that right now.
Yeah.
And it could be an opportunity for a number of restaurants to be able to serve outside, where people can enjoy themselves and the beautiful weather.
Yeah, that's a great question. So, we probably don't have it, but I guess, my initial thoughts, David, or my initial question would be, we're going to have, a COVID-19 phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and then at some point it'll all be lifted. Mm-hmm. So, so how do you address these kind of temporary accommodations?
Right, and I know the Economic Development Board is going to establish task forces and and they're already seeking representatives from the Cloverdale business community. What I've seen they put out is what they're calling they call it the business checklist mitigation measures.
Right.
And
that's a friendly name. Okay.
Right.
Real catchy.
And I think
better, but okay.
I have it right in front of me.
Right, and what Nina and the chamber team has been really effective at is marketing and promoting our restaurants and our businesses, and so I think it's really a continuation in a way that makes sure that they're addressing what the shelter in place requirements are and what phase we are in relative to Governor Newsom's program, if you want to call it that, for moving us out of this pandemic.
I guess what I want to be prepared for is I think that there are going to be these economic development, there's going to be the interest from the business community. It's like, this is what we want to do, but then how do we make sure that we are ready from like a zoning, parking, or a regulatory framework for what it is they're asking for. So what are your thoughts on this, Gus?
Well, I think it's important that if we do come out with something like this, where we're going to close a street down, that we don't commit to more than one at a time, only so that we can still maintain control of it. I'd hate to see all of a sudden outside in front of City Hall, it looks like Friday Night Live, you know, and the restaurants being unable to control that social distancing, especially if we invite restaurants up like Zinni's or Thai Spice that are going to actually have to come up and set up on the plaza. You know, all that has to be taken into consideration. So,
well, let me ask the chief that then. Does he want it to come to this committee first?
Sorry. Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Yeah,
well, does it have to come to the committee, or just can Nina work with the chief on getting that?
Well, are we going to have to see some? Are we going to have to see some updates or like temporary regulations?
Oh, I think we absolutely have to map it out a little bit and see what we're talking about here.
right. And just to be clear, I hope we don't limit ourselves to thinking that it's just downtown. I mean, for instance, you know, in Ferber Plaza, we have restaurants. Well, maybe, you know, again, subject to the Ferbers allowing it, you know, whether you look at, you know, bringing some of that indoor dining outside, if that's, again, what it seems like is the direction that they're going with respect to the shelter in place order, is to make sure you're compliant. And you do that by, rather than keeping everybody confined inside, if you open the restaurant, you move them out. And us being flexible to if a business is willing and it meets the health order, to be able to do that in some fashion.
Right.
And that's really what I was kind of just saying is you know, it is going to be dependent on the business community to kind of want to do something, and we're saying yes, this is if it complies with the health order, and it's just a matter of us saying, hey, we think this can work in a safe way, or, you know, being prepared to do that.
Right. And David, I just want to add that this has already come under the radar for us, and we've already addressed this. We would have to, when I mean by map it out, really see what the proposal is, really understand, you know, how it's going to look, and even create things that say, hey, this is what you have to do. This is what's going to be the requirement under these. And sometimes I think it even goes even deeper than the actual shelter in place order, so that we're making sure that we're in the right, if you, so to speak.
Right.
I guess I'm just going to assume too that if it's an event or a you know, partial parking lot closure at Ferber, that's up to the owner of Ferber Park, and or like, you know, Zinni's wanted to do something at Ace and they wanted to close, you know, cordon off part of the parking lot and do outdoor seating. That would be up to the landlord there. But then, and of course, conforming to conforming with the health orders. But then if we're closing First Street or closing part of Cloverdale Boulevard, I mean, we sort of already have the precedent for that in Friday Night Live, but depending on what the time frame is, that's a whole other thing.
Well, yeah, and first and foremost, the private property is not anything in our control.
Right, and that's
However, because of this and the health order,
yes,
we'd have to have a lot of controls on what was taking place in that parking lot,
right.
you know, relative to the health order.
So it sounds like maybe it does need to come back here, but we need to.
Right.
But then once we look at it, then we would need to send it to anybody. Anytime that we're going to have a temporary, we're going to have a temporary ordinance for the recovery.
So Irene, am I still muted, or can you
I
hear
can
me?
hear you, Nina.
Oh, good. So a number of our restaurants have sidewalk frontage,
Right.
and we would just need to develop the guidelines and give them the okay to do that. That wouldn't be, I don't think that would be overly complicated or take a lot of time, Jason, I'm hoping, because they're going to want to be ready to go as soon as I've heard this weekend.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
So
that's
and David may have some more insight. I am getting some starting, you know, entering business or re-entering business information from Healdsburg as well, and seeing what they specifically have tailored to the restaurants. I haven't seen it yet because it's still being finalized, but, and we could call it something much better than mitigation measures. So anyway, we could call it ideas for, you know, for re-entering or for restarting your business or whatever. Anyway, I'm up for it anytime if you want to put heads together and come up with a plan that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, I guess, you know, there are two layers that we're talking about. There's 2 layers of regulation.
More than 2.
Yeah. But I mean, I also kind of take anything that Healdsburg has with a grain of salt, because they are hurting so badly as far as their revenue sources for their budget. They are pushing really, really hard, more so than other jurisdictions. And I think they may be getting a little ahead of themselves. So I would, you know, I would use.
It'll all be considered. It won't be a.
Yes. Yeah. Anyway, okay, so that's all I've got on this. Anybody else? Any other comments? Irene?
No other comments.
Okay, great. Can we move? Are we ready to move on?
We are. I covered H1 and H2.
Great. Okay, standing items. Update on Sonoma County homeless.
There's not really no updates, Madam Chair. This has kind of been put on hold.
Okay, and we kind of already covered B, update on Measure P and cannabis permits, or what do you have for us?
There's a report in your packet, just with the latest revenue data.
Okay, any news on water leaks?
No new news. We continue to work on a new solution that will help with our meter reading data. It's been stalled a little bit because of the situation we're in, but we're still working on it.
Great. Update on pension liability legislation.
No updates.
I don't think they're working on that right now. Update on development of draft ordinance to address downtown vacancies.
We were ready to present that to council, and we didn't see that as a high priority. So when it's ready to revisit, we'll bring it back to council for input.
Yeah, I anticipate that's going to be on hold for a while. Assembly Bill 5.
No update.
Going nowhere. Yeah. Information only memos.
None.
Future agenda items. Discuss options for funding street improvements. We kind of went over that earlier. Do you want to, Gus, did you have anything to add? Oh, you're on mute, Gus.
Excuse me. No, not at this time.
Okay, great. Anybody else?
But I'd like to keep it on the pending items, if you don't mind, or future agenda items.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Well, actually, should we maybe move that up to standing items, given our discussion earlier?
Well, I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Do we want to take 85 off at this point, or do we want to keep it on until there's more direction?
Which one?
Do what?
The Assembly Bill 5, the worker status.
Yeah, you know, that is actually, they are going to be working on that. They were working on it. They were working on bug fixes until the current crisis. And I can't believe that is something that that's going to be ongoing. So I'm not sure it needs to be on our watch list right now.
Okay. We'll move up. We'll replace 8A with, or replace 6F with 8A.
Okay, great. And did we hit pending items? I never understood what that is, but.
Okay. Well, it's pending.
Well, it kind of wasn't everything we did, isn't it pending? Okay. Yeah, good of the order items.
I have a couple.
Okay,
Go ahead, Gus.
go ahead, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. I received at the last mayors and council members a Zoom call. A survey was asked to be done by each city. Do we want to have a mayors and council members meeting anytime soon? So that's just a question I'm throwing out there for my fellow council members. And if we do want to have one, what do we want to talk about? Everybody is pretty much meeting out, and the consensus is they'd rather not put one together unless there's a big demand for it. So I'm going to be asking all the council members in an email to let me know what they think.
Well, I'll tell you what I think, Gus.
Yeah.
I think
That's a no.
Our council meetings are bad enough. I can't imagine if we were all on a call.
There you go. So, and then the other thing was, Chief, I received a complaint from somebody about Cherry Creek, the water tanks up there, apparently are starting to become a hangout in the evenings. I don't know whether there's any validity to it or not. Just kind of passing that along to you.
Well, Gus,
I will make sure.
that's
I
where
will
the
make sure
drive-in
patrol.
movies are.
Yeah, I will make
That's
sure
what-
patrol does extra patrol up there.
Thank you. And then, David, I'd like to talk to you sometime over the next couple of days about lighting and landscape in a conversation that I've had with Exchange Bank about a loan program for merchants in Cloverdale.
Okay,
So
happy to discuss both.
that's about it.
Yeah, Gus, thanks for bringing that up. Yeah, the city of Healdsburg was able to grab some money from their sales tax and do small business loans, and anything that we could do to that should be part of any revenue efforts that we have going forward as far as economic recovery is supporting our small businesses.
Yeah.
So yeah, look forward to getting some news on that. With that, I will add.
Mayor,
Kevin has it.
Madam Chair, just
I-
really fast regarding item 5C, the high school display. I did learn that Cristina Lupe Duarte did a GoFundMe and got more money than she asked for, and it's going to pay for all the pictures for the Citrus Fair and also for yard displays for graduating seniors.
Oh, that's
Nice,
great.
nice.
That's great.
You know, I was thinking it would be nice, I always like having work for other people to do. But if that committee would actually get those signs and have pictures of the graduating class on them and put them in Kleiser Park. And then people can just kind of stroll through the park and see the graduates. But anyhow.
That would be a great permanent home for any signs or
Yeah.
things that were made. So that's a great idea. Well, with that, as we're closing, I'm very short. I just want to thank everybody for all of their hard work. You've really done hero work in the last couple of months. And I just really appreciate the can-do spirit, the support, sense of humor, camaraderie, all that good stuff. And, when this is all over, I can't wait to support Wolf House Brewery with all of you.
We're up for that.
All right. So with that, anything else?
One last good of the order. I just want to just say, if you're not aware, Madam Chair, Chief Ferguson now is a Cloverdale resident, so he can enjoy a beer now and walk home.
There you go.
Yeah, don't drink and drive. That's why we have brew pubs. That's why we have brew pubs that are local. Great. Well, congratulations and welcome again to Cloverdale. I hope you guys are enjoying yourselves. You're not getting a break from the heat, but at least you're getting a break from your commute.
Yep.
Agreed, 100%, and I love it.
There you go. Great to have you here. Okay. Well,
Have a good night.
All right, everybody. Well, we are adjourned until our next meeting on June 2nd. Everybody stay well, and thanks for all your hard work.